I'm not used to having a gavel.
That's what the gavel's for.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome to your Natural Resources Committee. I'm Senator Brandt from Plymouth, representing the 32nd District, and I serve as chair of the Natural Resources Committee. The committee will take up the legislative resolutions in the order posted. This public hearing is your opportunity to be part of the legislative process and to express your position on the proposed legislation before us. If you are planning to testify, and today is the opening for a regular hearing, we just have invited testimony today, and if you're an invited testifier, you can fill your green sheet out ahead of time and give it to Sally. I think she's contacted a lot of you. Be sure to print clearly and fill it out completely. Skip. When you come up to testify, please speak clearly into the microphone. Tell us your name, spell your first and last name to ensure we get an accurate record. We will begin each bill invited testimony today with the introducer's opening statement. We will finish with a closing statement by the introducer if they wish to give one. We will be using a 5-minute light system for all testifiers. When you begin your testimony, the light on the table will be green. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute remaining, and the red light indicates you need to wrap up your final thought and stop. Questions from the committee may follow. Also, committee members may come and go during the hearing. This has nothing to do with the importance of the resolutions being heard. It is just part of the process, as senators may have bills to introduce in other committees. I know that's where Senator Klaus is currently at the moment. A few items to facilitate today's hearing. If you have handouts or copies of your testimony, please bring up at least 12 copies and give them to Sally. We do not have a page today. Please silence or turn off your cell phones. Verbal outbursts or applause are not permitted in the hearing room. Such behavior may be cause for you to be asked to leave the hearing. Finally, committee procedures for all committees state that written position statements on a bill to be included in the record must be submitted by 8 a.m. the day of the hearing. The only acceptable method of submission is via the legislature's website at nebraskalegislature.gov. Written position letters will be included in the official hearing record, but only those testifying in person before the committee will be included on the committee statement. I will now have the committee members with us today introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Conrad. I represent North Lincoln.
Hello, Jana Hughes, District 24, which is Seward, York, Polk, and a little bit of Butler County.
Barry DeKay, representing District 40, which consists of Holt, Knox, Cedar, Antelope counties, northern part of Pierce, northern part of Dixon County.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mike Moser, I represent Platte County and most of Stanton County.
And Senator Marco Juarez, South Omaha, District 5.
Also assisting the committee today, to my right is our legal counsel, Cindy Lamb, and to my far right is our committee clerk, Sally Schultz. And I will turn it over to Vice Chair DeKay.
Ready?
Yep.
First LR that we are going to discuss today is LR 159, brought by Senator Brandt. You're welcome to open.
Folks up here. Good afternoon, Senator DeKay and fellow members of the Natural Resources Committee. I am Senator Tom Brandt, T-O-M-B-R-A-N-D-T. I represent the 32nd District, Fillmore, Thayer, Jefferson, Saline, and southwestern Lancaster counties. I appear before you today to introduce LR 159, an interim study to look at the nameplate capacity tax here in Nebraska. Last session, there was a bill, LB 468, to essentially double the nameplate capacity tax in an effort to help replace the inheritance tax. I was told by some that increasing the nameplate capacity tax would have no competitive disadvantage, and I was told by others it would be detrimental to Nebraska's energy sector. That bill did not pass last session, and so I figured since we are the committee of jurisdiction for many of the energy-related policy changes, that we should study the issue and have a logical discussion before making drastic policy changes. I have encouraged those stakeholders working on this study to also seek an outside study with the economists to help the legislature determine the original number of $3,518 per megawatt. My hope is that a new study can help us make the best decisions as senators, and that this new study can be provided to the committee and legislature before we start our work next January. I believe that will be happening this fall to supplement the hearing we are having today. I have invited a testifier who was here when the nameplate capacity tax was adopted in 2010, and to give some historical context. We will also have testifiers from the business and developer community. And lastly, I've invited NACO to testify because of their role in the bill referenced last session, their role in approving or denying these projects, and to hear about the impact the nameplate capacity tax has on our counties. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Juarez.
Yes, Senator Brandt, would you clarify your comment about what you want to happen in the fall?
Yeah, that wasn't written the best. We're encouraging the people that brought LB 468 to work with the economists to get us some solid numbers on how this will affect the state of Nebraska,
Okay,
or
thank you.
entities in the state of Nebraska, I should say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Chair Brandt. Good to see you as always, and appreciate your opening. Definitely want to give you an opportunity to respond if you wish, but I do just want to note for the record that as a senior member of the legislature, I find it disheartening that there is an emerging trend from this committee and other jurisdictional committees to lock the public out of public hearings. I see that you have designated both of the hearings before the committee today as invitation only, and I think that does a disservice to our second house.
Can I respond?
Please.
Okay. I guess historically, all the LRs I've been involved with have always been invited testimony. And so I just thought I was following precedent by allowing the introducers to bring the people they thought that could best answer the questions that the LR asked. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's my reasoning. I didn't have anything nefarious in not letting the public testify. Mm-hmm. And I know some of the subjects that we're going to approach on our hearings, a lot of people have contacted me about that. I've encouraged them to contact the introducer of the LR to see if they would let them testify. And if not, they're welcome to submit written testimony or contact the committee directly. And I think a lot of you, hopefully, they told me they were going to send emails to you, and hopefully they did.
They did. And I think that kind of speaks to the point. A lot of the constituents who reached out to me who have a great deal of interest in the matters of public policy before this committee, and as referenced in these specific interim study hearing resolutions, were additionally dismayed and disappointed that they would not have a way to weigh in. And while written comment or individual communications with individual senators is indeed better than nothing, it is not subject to dynamic conversation with senators of this committee and the testifier. It is not part of the public hearing transcript that is relevant for a variety of policy deliberation, potential litigation, and historical purposes. And I would encourage you to rethink how you structure these hearings moving forward.
So noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one. Senator Brandt, today's hearing is more of an informational meeting rather than we're not going to be acting on this. So coming out of this hearing, if something's being brought forward in the fall, that's when there'll be more availability for public information, public testimony. Am I right in saying that, or?
This is how I view this, is to gather this information. 468 was Senator Clement's bill, and he is here today. And he originally brought a bill to abolish the inheritance tax and to use the nameplate as a revenue stream. And then he had doubled the nameplate capacity. In the discussion on the floor, I think there was some confusion as to how this would affect counties and community colleges and schools and the people that pay the nameplate tax, and this is an effort to clarify those positions. And so if something comes after this, I would hope it would be included if Senator Clements is going to bring that bill forward again, and it would go through debate on the floor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Mosier.
Thank you, Senator DK. I don't think our office got hardly any contact at all about either of the hearings today. In my opinion, this is more of an inside baseball discussion of the nuts and bolts of the nameplate capacity tax and also the net zero issues. I think I've had people talk to our office in the past about wanting greener energy and being ecologically, environmentally sensible about how we generate electricity, and we certainly understand that. To me, this is more of a discussion of what obstacles there are in the way of achieving net zero. I mean, how far are you going to take that to get to accomplish net zero? What are you going to do to rates, ratepayers, and
So
users?
the net zero will be the next hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is.
I think Senator, speaking for my colleague, I think she was.
No need to, Senator. I can speak for myself.
Well, and you certainly do. I just think that there wouldn't be a lot of new information we're going to learn from constituents. I understand the position of the ones we've gotten, so anyway.
So this
move
is,
on.
this
Thank
is
you.
more of a historical, this
Yeah.
was passed in 2010. It has not changed since 2010. It's been 16 years. Is it time to change it? Up, down, indifferent? That's what we hope to find out today with some of our testifiers.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we are going to have invited testimony today, so I'm just going down the list of our first testifier will be David Levi or Levy? Levy.
Vice Chair Decay and members of the committee, good afternoon. David Levy, D-A-V-I-D, L-E-V-Y, with the Baird Home Law Firm in Omaha and Lincoln. We represent most of the developers of utility scale wind, solar, and battery energy storage projects in Nebraska. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I was part of the group that developed the nameplate capacity tax in 2010. I guess that means I'm old now, in that I'm now here to share the history of long ago. I remember we had one of the meetings on that bill right here in this room early in the morning, I think actually sitting up here in the front of the room. Remember it vividly. That group included senators, of course, representatives of the utilities, representatives of NACO, and representatives of the industry, such as myself. At that time, really, what we were talking about was utility scale wind energy, and in my testimony, for the most part, I will use wind as my example, but what I'm going to talk about also applies to solar and potentially to utility scale battery storage as well. As you all know, property tax fundamentally is derived, the amount of property tax due and paid is derived fundamentally from the value times the levy rate. Oversimplifying just a little bit, in a wind farm, everything above the ground is personal property. Nebraska generally follows federal law in determining what's personal property, what's real property, and the class life, the depreciation schedule of what's personal property. So most of the value, most of the assets in a wind farm, for example, the part that's above the ground is personal property. Again, that's taxed. The value of that for property taxes, or the resulting property taxes, the value times the levy rate. But for personal property, the value depreciates. And for wind energy facilities, federal law tells us that that has a 7-year class life. So what happened before the nameplate capacity tax was most of the property tax on a wind farm was personal property tax. That meant that there would be a big tax bill and a big revenue source in year one, and after about 8 years, there would be very little tax bill and very little revenues to the counties. Nobody really was happy with that. It was difficult to draw investment because it was difficult for the developers who had just invested all that money and hadn't had time yet to recoup that investment to then have that very large tax bill. And it was difficult for the taxing entities to budget when that revenue was not going to be sustainable, was not going to carry on beyond about that 8th year. It was also hard for the local county assessors to value that property. They're not used to valuing wind turbines like they may be a house or an agricultural operation or something like that. So in 2010, again, that group that I talked about got together, and ultimately the legislature hired an economist from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln from the Bureau of Business Research to determine what would happen if the taxing jurisdictions got the same revenue over the life of the project that they would under the then current system, but did so in an even series of payments, again, over the average life of the project. The result of that was the nameplate capacity tax, which the legislature adopted with LB 1048 in 2010, and the amount was $3,518 per megawatt per year. Again, that just took that tax bill that was very front-loaded, spread it out in even payments over what they determined was the average life of a wind energy project, which I believe at that time they determined was 28.5 years. They surveyed counties across the state to get a kind of an average levy rate, because that of course helps determine the tax bill as well, and they came up with that $3,518 per megawatt. The statute on the nameplate capacity tax, which is entirely in 4 sections in Chapter 77, Article 62, requires the Department of Revenue to collect the tax and distribute it proportionately to the taxing entities in the same manner as county treasurers distribute real property tax. That means that with the nameplate capacity tax, for example, school districts get 60 to 65% of that tax, counties get around 22 to 25%, fire and ambulance districts get their share, NRDs get their share, and so on. Anything after the average life of the wind farm is a windfall, no pun intended, to those taxing entities, right? So wind farms typically exist longer than the 28.5 years, and anything paid after is extra revenue. Thus, the nameplate capacity tax has benefited those taxing entities in that regard as well. Today, a wind turbine costs per megawatt, and I see the red light is on. You want me to conclude? Or?
If you can conclude in just a few brief statements.
Okay, real quickly. So today, the cost of a wind turbine on a per megawatt basis is about 2/3 of what it was in 2010. And levy rates have gone down as well generally, thanks to the work of this legislature and many others. And so if you did the same calculation that the economist did in 2010, today on a wind project, by my math, this is lawyer math, not economist math, but the rate instead of $3,518 would be about $2,300.
We gotta keep moving.
Okay.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Levy. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for a refresher on the history regarding nameplate capacity. I think I was in the legislature the last go around when it was first established and initiated. I remember my friend Senator Langemeyer chairing the committee and leading that effort. And in addition to providing kind of an updated revenue structure for new energy development, there was also a dual eye towards property tax relief, as it is always a perennial issue in Nebraska. And then, we hadn't really heard much about the nameplate capacity tax until the inheritance tax repeal came to the forefront over the last couple of years, and it's been lifted as a potential revenue replacement in that regard, so as to not overburden property taxes if we eliminate the inheritance tax. So, but for the discussion related to the inheritance tax, should this committee or should the legislature perhaps work with the university like we did in the past to update the formula or do a comprehensive study about this because it's been a while? Or is the only reason we're having this conversation is to scramble around and find money because Senator Clements wants to repeal the inheritance tax?
Thank you for the question, Senator.
You're welcome.
I'm not going to wade into the inheritance tax debate. I think it's a fair point that the nameplate capacity tax is a fixed excise tax, and it's been fixed at that number for 16 years now or 15 years
Right.
now. As I mentioned, if one were to redo that math, the number would actually be lower. There's been an assumption that there's been inflation over time, and so naturally that tax should go up. But in fact, due to economies of scale, maturation of the industry and things like that, as I mentioned, the cost of wind turbines, for example, per megawatt has gone down. I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily to hire the university, either have the industry hire the university or have the legislature hire the university or some economist, whoever it might be, to look at this for wind and for solar. When solar was added to the nameplate capacity tax in 2015, we didn't, or the legislature didn't redo the study. We just used the same number. I am told that if you were to do the math for solar today, the tax, and you did the same methodology, the tax would be about $3,200 a megawatt per year. And I also think back then we didn't have utility scale battery energy storage. We do now. That's pretty commonplace with utility scale solar projects. There's standalone battery energy storage as well. And I think it bears looking at whether to add the battery part of this new energy economy to a nameplate capacity tax as well. So I do think it makes sense to look at it again, but I see both sides of it because I think what the result could be is that the number would be lower. And I think there's a couple of issues there, right? One is you all know way better than I do, you've got budget challenges. And you've got counties who are relying on these tax revenues now. And I've been at lots of hearings and told counties you're going to receive X if you permit this wind project. I think you'd have to exclude existing projects probably if the rate went up or down. I think that would be fair. But long answer to your question, I think it makes sense to go look at it again because, as I mentioned, the cost of a wind turbine has changed. We didn't do the analysis for solar, and I think it bears looking at adding battery energy storage to this system as well. The system has worked really well. The certainty of it is very attractive to people who want to invest in our state.
That was actually a follow-up question, and I appreciate your response there too, but I know that you work with different companies that are developing these different technologies and have a lot of expertise in energy development and wind and solar. And one thing that I heard during our debate on the repeal of the inheritance tax and I think more than double. I think it was far more than double. I think it was something closer to almost an 80 or 90% increase in nameplate capacity that was put forward by Senator Clements in what I consider to be an arbitrary fashion. One thing that I did hear back from people is that there would be a disruption to the development of existing or current projects because the financing had already taken into account how Nebraska assesses this excise tax to figure out the cash flow and to figure out how to make the projects work. So if we were to make adjustments to the nameplate capacity tax up or down in the short term or near term, what do we need to think about in terms of a runway to minimize disruption in development?
Yeah, thank you again for the question. I think you would have to, you don't have to do anything. My suggestion is that you would exempt or, you leave the tax the same. Grandfather, thank you, projects that are certainly operating and those that are under construction, just as a starting point. I think that, from attracting and being open for business kind of a standpoint. I can also say we do work on these projects in Kansas, South Dakota, Missouri, Iowa, And with our nameplate capacity tax as it is, we're in the ballpark with those other states. But we're better off because we have a very simple, understandable system. If we were to, let's say, double the nameplate capacity tax, we would not be competitive.
Right.
Full stop.
That's
I really believe that to be the case, and I know you all face the very hard job of balancing wanting to be competitive and grow the economy as a way to create property tax relief with increasing taxes as a way to create tax relief.
Yeah.
So again, a long answer to your question, but I think at a minimum, you'd have to grandfather existing projects and projects under construction, and really think about the competitive impacts if you were to do something like double it. I also just don't think it's justified based on the math, and I think it singles out one industry for kind of targeting a tax increase that I don't think any industry should be singled out in that way. So I
the
think that's another
old
thing.
power to tax is the power to destroy. So yeah, for some of my colleagues, there's I think definitely a clear motive here to destroy alternative energy projects. So the last question I have for you, and you dovetailed on it very clearly, was I want to make sure that this committee doesn't look at this particular issue myopically, because of course, as we compare competitiveness to our sister states, there also might be straight up incentives for development of alternative energy projects or otherwise, and just making sure that as we focus on nameplate, we don't forget kind of the overall economic picture and approach that some of our sister states may or may not be taking, who are a bit further ahead than Nebraska, despite our abundant natural resources in the development of these technologies and energy sources to balance out our existing approach to meeting consumer and business energy need. So when you work in Kansas or Iowa or Colorado or South Dakota or wherever it might be, the present landscape today, as you described, is that Nebraska is in a somewhat competitive position because of our general approach to taxation on these issues?
We are. Our nameplate capacity tax, because of its amount and its simplicity, makes us competitive. I want to be clear too, there's also a real property component, the foundations, roads, those things. So on a wind farm, the total tax paid as a rule of thumb is about $5,000 per megawatt per year. On a solar farm, it's $4,000 per megawatt per year. So there's some real property. I didn't want to not mention that. But with those, yeah, that really helps us be competitive. Our regulatory structure at the state level is straightforward. That helps us be competitive. Quite frankly, our situation at some county boards, when they're exercising their land use jurisdiction, is incredibly challenging. That doesn't help our competitiveness, but we're not unique among other states in that regard as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Senator Mosier. Senator Mosier.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. So has there been a slowdown in the development of these energy projects with funding and tax credits and all the things that have changed nationally?
Not yet. We are busier than ever in this part of our practice because
Trying to get it up before it changes?
precisely.
So you say that changing it after the contracts are signed is not a good idea, unfair, however you want to say that. But yet, since it's cheaper to develop the generation capacity for these massive amounts of electricity, the nameplate capacity tax actually has declined, as you said, because their economies of scale, they're able to generate it with less investment.
The cost of the infrastructure has come down, yes, as the industry has matured. Now, the nameplate capacity tax has stayed flat.
But the cost of that is all baked into the cake at the beginning. That would
Sure.
only be
It's a
relevant
cost.
for future projects.
If it went up or down.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. And if the tax was doubled, what's that gonna do to your industry?
I truly believe it would make Nebraska less competitive, and especially right now when people are trying to beat the clock, if you will, at the federal level, resources are stretched. And so you're really down to, you might not be able to pursue all the projects you want to pursue. Suddenly Nebraska has an unfavorable tax climate. I might go build a project in Iowa if I had to choose.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thanks for coming in, Mr.
Thank you.
Levy. I'm going back to, you didn't get a finish at the beginning, and I'm kind of a numbers person. You had mentioned that if you did the same math today on a wind project, it would be, was it 2,800 straight up, or?
The number I actually got was $2,322.
2,300.
$23.22 per megawatt
Yeah.
per year.
Thank you. And then, now I'm just asking curiosity questions. Is the expected, you said at the beginning, expected life of a wind farm was around 28.5 years.
Correct.
Is that still the same today? Now we're 15 years in. Are they lasting 28.5, or do we know?
Typically, because technology advances, projects are repowered, is what they call it, after 10 or 15 years, which means that you change out typically the guts of the
Yeah, every, like,
generator
15,
part of it. You
12,
leave the
15
tower and the
years usually.
foundation. You would think that as technology improves, if you wanted to let that wind turbine go, it would go for longer than 28 and a half years today.
Okay. And then if redone, like if, we are potentially doing a new study, whatever, and I'm kind of curious what other states do. Like right now, we have the one tax flat, whatever it is for wind or solar, potentially battery storage. Would you recommend a separate solar versus wind versus battery storage? Or is that part of our competitiveness? Is that, you said it's very easy. Is it better to keep it one just straight across?
It certainly is simpler to keep it one, but if you were going to do the study and just purely follow the results of the study and follow the numbers, which essentially is what the legislature did in 2010,
Right.
I think you would end up with three
different
different
ones.
nameplate capacity tax rates.
Okay.
It's still a fairly simple system.
Yeah.
But-
Do you, and since we're looking at this, do you have any recommendations? Aside from redoing the numbers, do you have any other recommendations for us, especially with your background of looking at what Iowa does or South Dakota or whatever? Is there anything they do, best practices that they do that maybe we should consider implementing?
In this regard, no. I wish I had some
No,
clever ideas for you, but
That's good to hear,
really-
right?
think
That we're on
name-
the right path.
I think so. I think the nameplate capacity tax has served us very well. It's
Okay.
served the counties and the taxing entities well. They know what to expect. The Department of Revenue's figured it out. I think it works quite well. We do struggle some with the real property part of it, again, just because county assessors, they have a very hard job. This is not what they do every day. And so we work with them and provide them values of, feet of roads and yards of concrete and those things. But you can't change that because of the Constitution and proportionality and those things. So you have to leave the real property piece of it alone. That part's a little bit challenging. But no, our current system has served us very well. It's made us more competitive. I think the taxing jurisdictions have done well, and they've appreciated the simplicity of it. And certainly the industry has appreciated it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Juarez.
Thank you very much for coming today. So I have a question about what other taxes or payments do renewable energy developers pay to Nebraska communities? Are you familiar with other taxes that they pay?
So other taxes that they pay, they pay sales tax on the equipment. They have employees who receive income and of course then pay income tax. Many projects, this isn't a tax, but they contribute financially to various community endeavors and community projects. Really, property tax, sales tax, and income tax at some level or some point all affect this industry like other industries.
Okay, and could you remind me, I've forgotten from my tax days, on an excise tax, is that something that's paid at state and federal, or is excise just a state tax?
This particular tax is only a state tax. And typically, property taxes, at least to my knowledge and in my experience, are a state level tax, not a federal tax.
Right, and could you comment as far as, I mean, how much we can predict the behavior anyway? At the federal level, do we find that at that level they're supportive of renewable energy projects? Or what do you feel has been the voice from that level?
Currently, I would say definitely not supportive.
Not supportive?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm done, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Levy, real quick, you talked about the tax window being around 8 years or so. Was that modeled off of any kind of depreciation scale of any other industry or not?
So Nebraska follows the federal depreciation tables. And so federal law says a wind farm is 7-year class life property. And so you follow the federal depreciation schedule essentially. I'm not an accountant, but that's essentially how it was done when it was classified and taxed as personal property.
Okay, thank you. If there was legislation that would come forward, in your opinion, what do you think that legislation should look like if something does come forward after this hearing?
I would suggest respectfully 2 things. One, that legislation add utility scale battery energy storage to the nameplate capacity tax, and that legislation come up with some kind of a system to have the nameplate capacity tax amount evaluated and calculated for wind and solar and batteries with current projects grandfathered, and maybe that legislation require that restudy every 10 years or something like that, potentially. One of the bad things for industries is uncertainty, and we want to avoid that. And so if industry knows, okay, we're coming up on that 10 years, or okay, they redid the study and these are the amounts, that helps attract industry. That industry likes certainty, investment likes certainty.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before the next testifier, Senator Klaus, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Senator Klaus, District 37, which is Kearney, Shelton, Gibbon, and Buffalo County.
Okay, our next testifier will be John Cannon with NACO.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Decay, members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is John Cannon, J-O-N-C-A-N-N-O-N. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Association of County Officials, otherwise known as NACO, here to testify today on LR 159. Appreciate Senator Brandt bringing this bill. I think it's certainly worth looking at. There's been a lot of conversation about the nameplate capacity tax, whether it's right, it's wrong, or it's indifferent. And I certainly think that given a lot of the testimony that you've heard today, and also the testimony that was elicited back in 2010 under LB 1048, if I recall, that it's always worth taking a look at. I probably couldn't give you the history any better than Mr. Levy did. He's certainly very knowledgeable in this. I do want to say this used to be subject to property tax. And in the Constitution, we have the ability to exempt classes of personal property. And so that's why we have that distinction between we're going to exempt the personal property of a renewable energy generation facility, but not the real property, and that's what that distinction is all about. So we exempted the personal property of a renewable energy generation facility, and we replaced it with an excise tax. And so that excise tax, of course, is the nameplate capacity tax. How we figured that, again, Mr. Levy did a good job, but I do want to go over it because there's some components I want to talk about a little bit later in my testimony. We took the original cost of these turbines, what the average would be, and we said that's what's going to be called the net book value for taxation purposes. We determined what the average property tax rate was across the state. If you wanted to quibble, you could say you should look at the average rural rate, but that's neither here nor there. We determined the average amount of tax that's going to be paid for these generation facilities over a 7-year period. And as Mr. Levy noted, it was a very high tax that you paid in the first year, and it dwindled away to zero in years 8 and beyond. And so from the county's perspective and from the local political subdivision's perspective, they said, everyone's having biscuits for dinner in the first year because, you're having this huge amount that's going to be paid in. And in year 8, there's nothing further that's coming in. And so from a personal property perspective, that's one of those things where, from industry's perspective and also from the county's perspective, they were kind of inverse to each other in that it was really good for the local political subdivisions at first and not so good at the end. And for industry, it was not so great at the beginning because it's this huge tax bill at the beginning, but it dwindles away to nothing after years 8 and beyond. We divided that by the typical length of the project, and I'll get to that in a moment, and then we divided by the number of megawatts, and that's how we came up with $3,518 per megawatt. If we did re-examine this, as Mr. Levy had mentioned, we have the data to re-examine all of our assumptions. We know what the original costs are, and through economies of scale, those have generally come down. We know what the average length of a project typically will be. Back in 2010, the testimony was that these things are going to be on average about 30 years. Experience has shown us that it's actually probably a little bit less than that, and so that would probably drive up the nameplate capacity tax if you refigured it in under that. You also would want to look at what taxes would be generated. And there's an important distinction here, and I'm glad that Mr. Levy mentioned the repowering, because under a personal property tax regime, if I have a property that's a 7-year class life, and I replace it with something, we're resetting, we're going back to zero. The original calculations for the nameplate capacity tax did not take that into account. They said, here's the original cost of the guts of the turbine and everything that's above the ground, and we're just gonna take that number, do all the division, and go from there. If you were to recalculate this, you would want to know, what's the average life of a span of an inverter going to be, and of the motor, and of the chassis, and of all these different things, and figure out if this was subject to personal property tax, how much tax would it actually generate? And I think that number is going to be a little bit different than what was determined back in 2010. The other aspect of this is how you distribute those taxes. And so originally, what it was determined under LB 1048 is that we're going to take essentially this excise tax, and we're going to distribute it according to the property tax distribution in that tax district, wherever that property is situs. And things went very swimmingly until just a couple of years ago. And a couple of years ago, the legislature said, we're going to take community colleges off the property tax rolls. So, and you'd think, okay, what does that have to do with anything? What that did is it created a little bit of a problem for Northeast Community College, Senator Kay, and as you recall, you brought LB 50, because Northeast Community College said, the state is going to take us off the property tax rolls, and they have promised us that they will replace all the property tax that we had generated in years prior, or would have generated this year, but for the fact that we're off the rolls. And then Northeast Community College said, wait a minute, what's this $650,000 hole in our budget that came up? And that's because that was the nameplate capacity tax that they were getting from a lot of those projects that are up in Northeast Nebraska. And so LB 50 said, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go away from that distribution model. Instead of saying that we're replacing property taxes, what we're going to do is we're going to take 5% off the top. I see my red lights on, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Cannon? Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I know we have discussed this in recent debate around revenue replacement if we repeal the inheritance tax, but it's worth, I think, perhaps reaffirming the committee's understanding for purposes of this hearing. There's a certain set of counties that benefit from nameplate capacity tax because of their approach to the development of alternative energy.
Yes, ma'am.
That doesn't comport or match up with counties' collections in regards to inheritance tax.
Yes, ma'am.
So could you perhaps just talk about that generally? I think there's 5-10 counties that receive the majority of nameplate, is that right? Something in that regard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
5 or 6 or 7, yeah, something like
Okay.
that. Yeah, so that's a great question, ma'am, and I appreciate it. And this ties into where I was testifying when I was near the end of my testimony, and so I'll kind of delve into that just a little bit. With LB 50, we said we're going to redistribute. We're going to take 5% off the top, and we're going to give that to the community colleges, and then we'll redistribute according to the property tax distribution. But what we did through LB 50 is we said, look, this is no longer a replacement for property taxes. This is an excise tax, and it's a pot of money that's going to get distributed in some way, shape, or form. You know, from the county's perspective, as far as you know, how many counties are receiving, you're right. The bulk of the nameplate capacity tax is being collected by those counties that saw fit to approve these wind energy projects back in the day. Knox County was the very first one. They had a renewable energy generation facility before we even passed LB 1048, and that created its own issues, but that's neither here nor there. You know, from there though, you started to see that gradually start to pick up. We had 2 counties that were receiving nameplate capacity tax in 2011, the first year that we had this. We have 42 counties today, or 2024, that receive nameplate capacity tax distribution. So the number has certainly grown, and the question becomes, you know, if there's would that number grow even more if there is an incentive for the folks that take the political risk of approving or disapproving renewable energy generation facility. And so that's why this ties into the distribution model. If the legislature has decided that it wants to go away from just a simple redistribution of property taxes, it certainly can do so. And if they want to say, well, we're going to incentivize further the development of renewable energy by giving an incentive to the people that take the political risk and, oh, by the way, have the damage to their roads. I'm talking about the counties, by the way. Then, you know, the legislature certainly can do that.
Okay, I have another follow-up question. So I was grateful to be a part of the working group that was looking at whether or not there was a thoughtful way to repeal the inheritance tax without increasing the burden on property taxes. And I know that you and your staff and a real diverse set of stakeholders came together to dig pretty deep into all of the different line items and revenues and expenses impacting counties. And that was a important learning opportunity and a lot of good policy discussions. But one thing that did not emanate from that working group was I'm still puzzled as to how an 86% increase in nameplate capacity tax as proposed during the last legislative session came to fruition. Do you have any insight as to how Senator Clements or others supporting that measure came up with that?
No, ma'am. I don't. I wouldn't want to speak for Senator Clements, especially.
No, I wouldn't want you
sitting
to
right there.
either. Yes. Very good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Decay. Thanks for coming in, John.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Is the current distribution that we've got, I mean, we passed the LB 50, which pulls off that top, but the current distribution within a county, does that make sense to you? Or, I mean, it's just...
Prior to LB 50 passing, I would have said that it makes sense, because what we had determined under LB 1048 was that we want the excise tax to replace the property taxes that have been lost due to the exemption. Mm-hmm. When you, sorry, in the building, I feel like we're all part of one big happy
Yes.
family. When the legislature passed LB 50 last year, the message was very, very clear that this is no longer just a replacement for property taxes. This is an excise tax, and it's a pot of money. And so once you've severed that link between we're going to replace the distribution of property taxes, I think then it's fair game. And now I might get myself over the tips of my skis because, you know, the legislature could say, yes, counties get nothing. We would testify against that. But, you know, but when you look at who has the actual damage to their infrastructure when these things are being put up, who takes the political risk for approving or disapproving a renewable energy generation facility, I think it's pretty obvious where my loyalties lie, but I think any person, anybody that I would talk to would say, well, that makes sense, that the counties would probably get a larger share of the pie.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Real quick, LB 50, that just kind of did, in my mind, I think it righted the ship. The tax that was lost to the community colleges and stuff the year before was a kind of a windfall for the counties at that point. It was just kind of leveling the playing field back to where it was before with the amount of dollars being talked about.
If you're looking at it, Senator, strictly from the perspective of who was getting what prior to the passage of the bill that took community colleges off of property tax rolls, then yes, you're absolutely correct. If you're looking at it, however, from the kind of the fundamental philosophical view of this was intended to replace property tax distributions, period, full stop, then once the state said we're no longer going to have community colleges that are going to be on the property tax rolls, and oh, by the way, the question had come up when we were talking to the community colleges, and their very capable representative, Ms. Wistrick, about what became LB 50. One of the questions that came up, not from us, was, well, why don't you just ask the state to make up what you're losing in nameplate capacity tax? And after some chuckling, polite chuckling, no, that's not going to work because the state's probably not going to make up $650,000 for Northeast and however much for Western, and so on and so forth. And that's fine. But again, the point was being made that we're not interested in this as a distribution to replace property taxes. We're interested in just in this is a pot of money that we have access to.
Okay. Senator Hughes.
Thank you. You prompted me to have one more question. On that, the piece that goes now to community colleges, do they distribute it among the community colleges how they prior, like Northeast, for example, had a lot of nameplate, but maybe Southeast community didn't? Or is it evenly distributed, do you know? Or is it just go in the pile of money that goes to community colleges?
I believe that it's distributed essentially according to what their nameplate capacity would have been.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Senator Juarez.
Okay, so, and I don't really know the history behind when the community colleges were, benefiting from this tax. But now that our university has been cut, in their budget, with the support from the state, can the university somehow participate in getting benefits from the nameplate capacity tax? Is that possible?
Well, and again, ma'am, you hit the nail right on the head because prior to LB 50, it was just a replacement for property tax, period. And the University of Nebraska, the University of Nebraska doesn't receive property taxes. They don't levy for a property tax. However, after LB 50 passed, and we said we were identifying this as a revenue stream and not a replacement for property taxes, then all bets are off. If the legislature said, you know what, we're going to have the nameplate, I'm going to get in trouble, by the way, but if the legislature said we want to have the nameplate capacity tax go 95% to the University of Nebraska and 5% to the community colleges, and that's it, the legislature can do that. And again, we've severed that link between saying it's a replacement for property taxes that are lost because these things would otherwise have been exempted to this is a revenue stream it's up for grabs.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much. And I thank you, Mr. Cannon. I know that sometimes we speak in shorthand because time's compressed and we're trying to cover a lot of complex topics in a short time, but is it actually accurate to say that LB 50 cut the link between property tax and nameplate? Because the legislative findings in the statute that established the nameplate capacity tax was very clear that nameplate should never be singled out as a source of general revenue during time of economic hardship. And I'm looking at Senator DeKay's LB 50, and that was not repealed.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Next testifier, Kevin Quinn from Invenergy.
All right. Good afternoon, Natural Resources Committee. My name is Kevin Quinn, K-E-V-I-N, Q-U-I-N-N. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Affairs for Invenergy. Invenergy is the largest privately held developer, owner, and operator of American energy solutions with a proven track record of over 2 decades and a portfolio that includes natural gas as well as wind and solar. We've been working in Nebraska for over a decade and have developed over 800 megawatts of wind projects across Antelope, Boone, and Wheeler counties, which represent about 20% of all clean energy in the state. These projects generate about $2.8 million in nameplate capacity tax revenue each year. I'm here today to bring the perspective of how a change in the nameplate capacity tax would impact the companies that develop these assets. Developing a wind or solar facility often takes several years with a whole host of complex processes to navigate and numerous costs incurred along the way. Only toward the end of this multi-year process do developers begin looking for prospective buyers using project spend, anticipated infrastructure and construction costs, asset performance modeling, and other financial factors like the lifetime tax liability to determine what price to offer customers. So what happens when there's a change in the tax regime? In the short term, changing the nameplate capacity tax for projects in development will create delays. Whether a project is already contracted and not yet built or just being marketed to prospective customers, a change in the tax liability will directly impact the price of energy in the contract, which will necessitate going back to the drawing board to reprice or renegotiate to account for the new financial input. That's going to cause a delay. As a result, this is going to delay payments to Nebraska landowners and communities and delay bringing online the electricity needed by Nebraska consumers, not to mention the fact that project delays add cost to developers. In some cases, a dramatic tax increase on a project at a late stage could make the asset uneconomic altogether, resulting in a cancellation. In the long term, a change in the nameplate capacity tax will be accounted for in the cost of future projects, and if it's higher, it will unsurprisingly increase project costs. However, like any good or service, increased taxes almost always trickle down to the consumer. Clean energy provides about 1/3 of Nebraska's electricity needs, so raising taxes on future projects will result in higher prices charged by developers, higher costs paid by the public power districts that purchase the electricity, and ultimately, likely higher utility bills for Nebraska ratepayers. If the tax is increased too dramatically, this could disincentivize future development in the state and force businesses like ours to prioritize our investments elsewhere. Comparing different tax regimes is often like comparing apples and oranges. Some do it at the state level, some assess at the local level, but we did some really rough math to convert the surrounding states' wind energy property taxes to dollars per megawatt, like the nameplate capacity tax, and saw that Nebraska is actually quite competitive, coming in roughly at the middle of the pack. States like Wyoming and Montana levy upwards of $6,000 to $7,000 per megawatt or more, whereas states like Kansas and New Mexico offer financial incentives for clean energy projects, keeping their equivalent nameplate capacity taxes under $3,000 a megawatt. For reference, our back-of-the-napkin math suggests that 4 of the 6 states bordering Nebraska already have a more favorable property tax treatment than the nameplate capacity tax at its current rate. Of course, there are many things we look at when deciding where to develop and how we can price our projects, but state taxes are not an insignificant consideration. The point I'll conclude with is that, like many industries, the clean energy sector is evolving quickly and navigating a multitude of changes to our tax and policy regimes. This creates a level of uncertainty that frankly makes investing difficult. For many years, we've found Nebraska to be a business-friendly state with a measured approach to tax policy and have appreciated the opportunity to work with you all and lend our voice to the conversation about the nameplate capacity tax. As referenced before, we do anticipate a more detailed third-party analysis regarding a recalculation of the tax and look forward to continuing discussions with you about how this analysis shapes up and how it could inform future policy decisions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Decay. Thank you for coming in. You've heard the prior testimony that they're suggesting a study done since we haven't done anything since 2010 or whatever. Do you feel like a separate tax, a separate one for solar, nameplate, solar, wind, and storage makes sense? Do other states do that? What have you seen?
I'm actually not aware of other states that do it that way, but I think to Mr. Levy's point, like the conclusion of that study would probably indicate that that makes sense, because if the nameplate capacity tax is more or less a proxy of property taxes, the right. biggest factor there is the cost of the infrastructure, and that's going to be different among solar, wind, and storage.
Okay, and then how does like, this is all a balance too, because you guys also receive some federal tax credits for these types of renewable energy projects. How does this relate to that? I mean, is it kind of like, well, the tax credits offset what you're paying, on these nameplate, or just big numbers? I know
Sure.
it's gonna be different per state, but.
It's pretty different, yeah. I think the state taxes is something that, you know, we, as I've mentioned, factor into the price of the energy that we then offer to buyers, and then as in all likelihood, we maintain ownership through a power purchase agreement, so we're, you know, paying those taxes. The federal tax situation is a little bit of a different conversation, because those tax credits are at a level that is larger than our company's tax liability. So we often pursue tax equity investors to invest in a project where then they get the
They're
benefits.
getting the tax
Right.
credit. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, please.
Senator Juarez.
So, what would you comment about, what are some of the other challenges for renewable energy sources that come to our state? I mean, is there any other issues that we should address besides, you know, considering the nameplate tax?
So I would just, with a broad brush paint that across the country, I think the two biggest challenges for renewable energy are interconnection and transmission. I was surprised to learn that, you know, once you identify a good site to put a wind or solar facility, you know, in addition to lining up the, you know, land campaign, signing leases, and understanding what permits are needed, you almost immediately apply for the ability to plug it into the grid, because that often takes many years and is often the outside sort of driving factor of how long it takes to conclude development, is when you finally are able to understand what impacts that project will have to the grid, pay for it, and then be able to move forward. Then the other one is a bit more abstract. You know, I think that one, the transmission issue sort of fundamentally comes down to the fact that most wind and solar facilities are built in rural, you know, more sparsely populated parts of the country, and a lot of the energy is needed in load centers in cities. And so it sort of presents this chicken and egg problem where, you know, do you build a wind farm in the middle of nowhere and hope that someone will build a transmission line to connect that to the city? Or do you build a transmission line to nowhere and hope that some, you know, developer will build a wind farm out there? And so I think that has continually been a challenge, not to mention just general grid constraints of moving energy and electrons from one place to another.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Is Jen Krager here?
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Takei, members of the Natural Resources Committee. For the record, my name is Jennifer Krieger, JENNIFER-CREAGER. Appear before you today as a registered lobbyist for the Greater Omaha Chamber. This is a great opportunity for us to offer a big picture, high-level view of the state of power availability and its impact on business. We first want to thank Senator Brandt for bringing the interim study and continuing this conversation on how best to meet our energy and infrastructure needs, both of which are core components of the future of economic development in Nebraska. We stand at a crossroads right now in energy generation and economic development in a way that very few people expected a decade ago. Simply put, the needs of a modern economy are very energy intensive, and investment decisions are increasingly influenced by the power generation capacity of potential locations. And this just isn't clustered in a few areas like tech and data. In an effort to stay competitive, businesses are modernizing their practices and becoming more innovative. As a result, every stage of the manufacturing process is becoming more advanced, while we see things like additive manufacturing, smart factories, and just generalized automation in general become more commonplace. These trends are making manufacturing much more power hungry in general. It is not as simple as saying we can solve the grid strain by saying we'll avoid one or two industries. It's better to think of the increase in energy needs as the natural evolution of our economy. Fortunately, Nebraska is better positioned than most Our partner OPPD is already in the middle of a massive demand-driven effort to double its generation capacity by the end of the decade. If we want to achieve this goal, it will require an all-of-the-above strategy for generation. Natural gas, oil, coal, landfill gas, nuclear, solar, wind, hydro, electric, you name it. We can't afford to be picky. This is why LR 159 is particularly well-timed, as renewable sources make up a larger percentage of our state's generation than some realize. In 2022, the Department of Energy found that Nebraska ranked third in the nation in land-based wind capacity installations, adding 602 megawatts of production, which is comprised of 21% of in-state nameplate generation. I do want to make sure that I know that historically the Greater Omaha Chamber has not weighed in on the rate of the nameplate capacity tax itself. We've not taken positions on those bills. However, it's crucial to emphasize that our state's economic future is directly tied to our ability to have a grid that will meet our state's future growth needs. Anything less places an artificial ceiling that will cause us to fall behind states that are making these investments. For example, South Dakota already charges a lower tax on their wind and solar development at $3,000 per megawatt. We don't compete in a vacuum. States that make investments across the board will be the leaders in future economic development. States that restrict their options to certain sources will see slower energy growth and missed opportunities. We appreciate Senator Brandt and the committee's willingness to take a look at our energy needs, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Ms. Krieger. Good to see you, as always. And I know you're speaking perhaps on behalf of your colleagues at the State Chamber as well. I had a chance to look over their recent energy report, and I think it indicated that in terms of economic development and economic prosperity challenges that Nebraska is looking at, workforce, of course, number one, the challenges that we're all well aware of, but that energy was a close second.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was a very illuminating finding. I don't know if you want to expound upon that or just talk about perhaps even anecdotally how your conversations go with recruiting and retaining businesses in the Omaha area. Are you already kind of up against the wall? Is that a top issue for businesses that are seeking to contribute to our economy and grow our economy? Is that something that's top of mind for them when they're making siting decisions and you're chatting with them?
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about
That's okay, just a
yeah.
general idea.
I think power and business development and power availability have always been interconnected. In fact, when we do our economic development at the Omaha Chamber, OPPD has their own in-house economic development team. We work hand in glove on all of our projects and have in the 11 years that I've been at the Chamber and probably before that. I would say when I first started at the Chamber, the issue was always, we're such a great place to be because power is so affordable in Nebraska. I wouldn't say that's changed a lot, but it has transferred from, please come here, it's so affordable, to now it's all about, can you meet our demand? Can you meet the needs that we have? Site development is a huge part of economic development. That kind of infrastructure availability is, I would say, at the forefront of every project conversation from the beginning. And I hope my OPPD colleagues would concur with that. Mr. Fernandez is sitting behind me, so he can throw things at me if I'm speaking out of turn. But I think they've done a good job of resource planning and thinking about what projects are on the horizon. But they are always at the table with us when we are recruiting projects, when we're talking to other companies about expanding. I think power is so interlinked with economic development. It's a very essential component. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Senator Klaus.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Kay. Jen, in your working with the economic development, have you seen the shift from, well, we're going to be here because it's renewable energy, or we don't care where it comes from, we just want the power?
I think sometimes it depends on the company and sometimes it depends on the industry. We have a large data center cluster in the Omaha area. I know when that was happening 15 to 10 years ago, they were very insistent on renewable energy only, either only or the majority of their power coming from that. So I think it depends on the business and I think it depends on the industry, but they have been more selective, maybe is the right word, or choosy about making those demands on generation.
Because they realize that renewable is not dispatchable and they can't have it when they want it. And so now the power is more important to them than where it comes from.
Right. I think, I don't know, I guess I don't know how that's changed, but I know that some companies in the past have been very specific about they want it from a certain source. I think to your point, now that it's kind of, there are availability challenges all over the country, I think that they're probably less constrictive about that.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. Actually, I wasn't going to ask anymore, but my good friend Senator Klaus piqued my interest, which is the whole point of public hearings, to have a dialogue with colleagues and stakeholders and the public on the record. But to your point, each corporate has a different corporate culture and corporate ethos as guided by their board of directors. And I know that when Nebraska has celebrated some, let's say, significant gets or wins in the economic development field, looking at those big multinational corporations, there has been, as part of that site selection, a clarity and a requirement that renewable energies are on the table. But for that option and opportunity, we would not be having those celebrations. Is that fair to say?
I do think that's
Okay,
been fair to
thanks.
say in the past, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
According to my sheet, our last testifier will be Eric Stalker.
Thank you, Eric Stocker, ERICSTOCKER. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank members of this committee for the invitation to have the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Eric Stocker. I'm the Manager of Government Relations for AES. AES is an American-based energy company that owns and operates an all-of-the-above portfolio of energy assets in 48 states, as well as global operations in Central and South America, Europe, and Asia. We operate utilities in the Midwest and liquefied natural gas operation. I represent our clean energy division that builds, owns, and operates utility-scale solar, wind, and energy storage facilities. And we are the proud operators of Nebraska's current largest solar energy facility, the 81 megawatt Platteview Solar, located in Saunders County. I appreciate the opportunity to testify from a point of view as an operational company and the effects that changing the nameplate capacity would have on our business. First, I'd like to talk about a couple of the ways that companies can go about and contract different types of energy. So you have development transfer agreements where you would do most of the development and pre-work ahead of time and then sell that off to another party to finish that. You have a build transfer agreement where we would develop, build it, and then sell it to another entity where then they would own and operate it. But the vast majority of the contracts today and the ones that we mostly use are power purchase agreements or PPAs. And this is a model that we have contracted our project with. And with this approach, we develop, build, own, and operate, and then we sell that at a fixed rate to our customer over the course of a 15 to 40-year contract. So those are generally the amount of years varying within there that these terms are set for. So, and I think there's been a lot of announcements today from either third-party corporates or either OPPDs or NPPD where they've announced these PPA contracts that they've had. So when calculating these fixed rate costs, we need to consider the cost to build the project, plus other things such as property taxes or nameplate capacity tax in order to figure out that per megawatt price. So the current rate obviously is set at $3,518 per megawatt, And according to the Nebraska Department of Revenue, from a recent 2024 report, there was over $12 million that was collected from the nameplate capacity tax. Looking at when it started, most of the revenue increases, it was quite small, and then it came within the past 5 years, which correlates to where we've seen the large build out of these utility scale solar and wind facilities. So that means that most of these projects that are operating under PPAs are very early in their contracts, so they haven't had the time to actually realize the full cost and the full revenue. So any sort of sudden change to that capacity tax would have dire consequences on the projects and finances, and that could really create a great concern for their viability. So this would be essentially moving the goalpost in the middle of the game. Sorry, I know it's football season, so couldn't help myself with that. But our project, we're expected to pay nearly $5.5 million in the nameplate capacity tax alone. So when looking at LB 468, where it would almost double it, we'd be looking at paying over $10 million, and all of that would have to come out of our budget. So which would obviously create a huge gap in revenue and unanticipated costs, with no way to recover those since we've already signed our contract with that. So this is obviously a big concern. Stability and understanding what your projected costs are perhaps one of the largest things that we look at when we're going about to build a project. So another potential consequence is sometimes in these PPAs, there's a point where you can sell that. So let's say if someone was contracting with a utility, if they were to buy that and there was a rate increase, that would be transferred then over to the utility, which would end up resulting in higher rates for ratepayers. So on AES, we're open to looking at a study to see what the true fair market value and for the rate adjusted today would be. But it is vital from our perspective that any sort of increases would need to be grandfathered in for current operational projects, because there wouldn't be a way to recover those costs. So thank you for your time today. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing one. Senator Hughes.
Such a brat. Thank you, Vice Chair Decay. Thank you for coming in. Just, so you heard prior, I think maybe we were talking about the first, with Mr. Levy, that he suggested if anything would change that you grandfather in current projects and projects currently getting built. I'm assuming you would be yes, doing that. You're saying if it changes significantly, we run the risk of, pushing development away, like no one will come here. Do you think, kind of like I asked the person prior to Ms. Krieger, do you think that we're gonna do a study, doing a separate nameplate tax, solar, wind, storage makes sense? It sounds like other states don't really do that. Is it just something, maybe we see what the numbers come out, and if they're close, you keep it the same, but.
So with sort of like a flat excise tax, I haven't really seen examples in other states where they classify them separately. I have under property tax rates. I know the state of Missouri, they classify wind at a different rate. They're currently going through the process of looking at what to do for solar, and so that's still under discussion of they're going to tax it at a percentage or per megawatt rate. So, but currently right now, when I see any sort of flat taxes in that sense, it's usually for all of them.
For all, okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Is this the last testifier?
Yes.
Okay, it's more like a comment. I drive by a solar array all the time, and they have articulating panels that follow the sun, and they have the nameplate data, that's capacity that's there. And those panels are going every which direction. So I asked the question, I said, are we pulling maintenance on this stuff? And they said, well, yeah, they're keeping them clean. I'm like, so why aren't they articulating, why aren't they managing that? I go, because they're meeting, the way it is, they're meeting the nameplate data or the capacity. So we're not getting the full benefit of capacity for these solar arrays. Now, I don't know if it's this particular one or what, but I'm just like, okay, so we're basing on a number that could be higher if they would maintain it better. And it's not, I'm just making a statement, I don't expect you to answer that, but it's just an observation that I've had over the last several months, just like, what is going on? because these things should be, if they're being maintained right, they should be following the sun, articulating, tracking. And so, then I'm correlating that to, well, what's their nameplate capacity, because they've undervalued their nameplate capacity. They could be generating more, we could be getting more renewable output, maybe not a lot, but anything helps. So that's just a comment that I observed.
Thank you, Senator. Well, I do know that if you're looking to inject more than what you've initially applied for in the grid, you can only, all the studies are only for that amount that you made your application for. So, but thank you.
No, yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
While Senator Brandt comes up to close, obviously this was invited testimony, so there are no letters of support or opposition.
There were actually.
There were. Okay, sorry, here it is. There, for this LR 159, no letters of proponents, no letters of opponents, and one letter in neutral capacity. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make this pretty quick. Mr. Levy, first of all, I'd like to thank all the people that testified today. But a couple of the points need to be reiterated. Maybe now is the time to reevaluate our tax because the industry is so much more efficient. And back in 2010, we didn't have any solar, and now we've got a lot of solar in the state. Developers like the certainty of the current tax, whatever that number is, and we definitely need to add battery storage is currently the new thing happening in Nebraska. We need to add that into the tax. And I don't know if it was Senator Conrad or Senator Hughes that brought this up, but when Mr. Cannon was testifying, what would have happened under LB 468 is the excise tax would have been divided equally across the state. And coming from a county that's got windmills, I see that as blatantly unfair. And it's unfair because if you're from a rural area and you're going through this energy development, it's like a civil war out there. And so we have a lot of counties that are putting massive setbacks into effect, like 3 miles between windmills and things like that to keep the industry out. Whereas those counties that did bleed some real blood and get some windmills and solar panels in, I believe the incentive needs to be there that those counties are the ones that benefit from the tax. And that's just an opinion. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and if there are none.
Any questions?
Yes, I have.
Senator Juarez.
Thank you. I'd like to know, how does urban benefit from these projects, or do they even benefit at all?
They don't benefit on the nameplate tax per se, because that goes to the counties, the counties where it's generated primarily, with the exception of the community colleges. Community colleges cover, in my case, Southeast Community College is 15 counties. So Lincoln's an urban area. They get a benefit from the windmills that we have, some benefit from the windmills down there. Where you get the real benefit is Google builds their data centers in the Omaha metro area, and you get a lot of high-paying jobs. You get business incentives from the state. They turn around and say they want renewable energy, and they go up to Senator DeKay's area up there, and they stick in a wind farm. That power on paper goes to a data center. So that's good business development. So yes, that's the benefit that the urban areas get out of this. This tax per se, not very much directly.
You know, I think that when I look at our state overall, like I've gone to visit to see the solar project. I was up in the Norfolk area and saw a project up there. But when you look like in the urban areas, as far as solar panels on people's homes, you really don't see it a lot, that having the solar panels on the homes. And I really wonder, you know, why it is that Nebraska, to me, doesn't appear to be going that route having the energy from this source in comparison to other states. It's just like, to me, it's another area where we're so far behind in the development, you know, to help ourselves to even keep our costs down. And I just think that there's so much work that needs to be done in that area yet. Maybe something that we're missing in our homes to do it. Because like for me as a homeowner, I was mentioning to someone who's in the industry, I said, I'm very scared to do it on my house, on my roof, because nobody in my neighborhood has it on their roof. And then I worry about, well, am I gonna have a hard time selling my house because I'm gonna be the only one that has these solar panels up on top of my roof? It's like, to me, Nebraska has so much more progress to make in that area, besides transportation, which is a whole other story, but I'm just making the comment, I think we could do a lot more work. Somewhere, you know, there's huge gaps there on why I feel our state isn't taking off in comparison to Colorado, for example.
Sure, other states have better incentive programs. In Nebraska, those small-scale solar would be net metering with your local provider, which in your case is OPPD, in my case would be Norris Public Power. They're already maxed out on that. They're already on a phase 2 kind of a deal. And also, I know when I was on the Judiciary Committee, the homeowners associations in Omaha have, I don't know, are they codicils or
Like a restrictive covenant
a
type
restrictive,
thing.
thank you, Senator, restrictive covenants on that. And somebody did bring a bill to try and change that, and it didn't make it out of committee at that time. But what we're talking about here is large-scale, scalable renewable energy projects. We're talking, you know, 70, 100, 200, 300 megawatt projects here. The homeowner isn't going to be paying a tax, a nameplate tax on their 100 kilowatt solar panel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? See none, this ends the hearing on LR 159.
And if everybody would like to take a 5-minute break, we are going to resume at 2:35.
That's not 5 minutes, buddy.
My watch. My watch. Sorry.
Oh, it is. Hello.
How you doing?
Got the seat warmed up. Good. I would guess you're probably going to get a few questions. So I would guess it's probably going to be closer, probably to 4 o'clock maybe. 4 o'clock. You'll see it better. What position? got most of the committee back. Are mics on? Okay, we are good to go. Senator Storm, you're welcome to start on LR 234.
Okay. All right. Chairman Brandt, members of the Natural Resources Committee, for the record, I'm Jared Storm, Jaredstorm. I represent Legislative District 23. I'm here today to introduce LR 234. First, I want to thank all the testifiers for coming today and for being transparent and for providing information to the committee. The goals of this interim study are to examine impacts and goals of net zero plans of Nebraska's major public power utilities. More specifically, I'm interested in the impacts net zero plans may potentially have on ratepayers, reliability, employees of the public power districts, and the fiscal impact of closures of base load generation in the communities these facilities are located. Base load energy plants like nuclear, natural gas, and coal employ hundreds of employees, many of whom are union employees with high-paying jobs. Many times these jobs are located in communities where the power plant is the main employer. Decommissioning these plants, whether it is due to age or to replace them with new technologies or intermittent generation, may have an impact on these communities, and we should know what that impact might be. Earlier this summer, Chairman Brandt sent out a letter to our public power districts who have adopted net zero policies. The letter contains several questions relating to cost, reliability, economic impacts to the local communities with baseload plants, etc. I appreciate the transparent responses we received. However, some of the responses raised some concerns with me. When asked about the total cost to achieve net zero, or whether there is an off-ramp in reliability, if reliability was compromised, the responses were somewhat vague at best. For instance, LES responded that they have no definitive cost estimate for net zero policies. OPPD responded that while they have a 12 to 22% estimate in cost increases, they have no mechanism in place for an off-ramp if reliability is compromised. I believe if our public power districts are going to be adopting these policies, they should know at least an estimated cost to implement these policies and the effects it will have on customer rates, while at the same time ensuring that they won't sacrifice reliability to achieve the goal of being net zero. As other states push forward with increasing the diversity of their generation mix, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation has recently raised numerous concerns that some regional transmission organizations, such as the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, to our east will not be able to meet their peak load demands, and care must be taken to ensure dispatchable generation is not only available today, but into the future to meet the growing demand. Some of these concerns have shown to be accurate. Recently, PJM Interconnection, the largest RTO in the U.S. that serves 13 states and D.C., in the Northeast, issued a maximum generation alert and a load management alert due to high peak demands due to the recent heat waves and the lack of dispatchable generation due to the premature retirements of baseload units. This prompted the federal government to issue a 90-day emergency waiver on August 7th, requiring a coal unit at Wagner Generation Station in Maryland to remain operational despite it being scheduled for decommissioning to meet Maryland's 2035 goal of 100% green energy. Unfortunately, these measures were not enough, and the Baltimore area experienced rolling blackouts. Furthermore, the net zero or clean energy policies may be driving up electric rates on customers. A September 2024 study by economist Jonathan Lesser and energy researcher Mitch Rawling examined the economic cost of Washington and Oregon's net zero policies. This study concluded that energy rates for customers will nearly double to achieve net zero. Later in the hearing, you will hear from the executive director at Chimney Rock Public Power, who is currently navigating on how to respond with increased rates due to Colorado's clean air policies. As energy policy around the nation is shifting to a more diverse set of generation sources, I believe it is prudent to examine the potential effects of net zero policies. Once again, I appreciate everyone being here on a Friday afternoon, and to the testifiers for being open and transparent. Thank you, and I'll take any questions you might have, but
Thank you, Senator Storm. Let's go for questions. Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Storm. Good to see you. And how interesting that you put a fine point on transparency a couple times in your opening statement. So just a few kind of top-line questions, I guess. Do you think energy policy is a matter of the public interest?
absolutely.
Do you think environmental concerns are a grave matter of public concern?
I think we all want to have a healthy environment, yeah.
Sure. And so do you think the public should have a right to weigh in on issues as you lifted in LR 234?
Yeah, we had public responses. I saw some people were able to write in their thoughts, email.
Do you think they should be able to engage in dialogue with the committee on the record, or only your hand-selected perspective should be presented to the committee?
Yeah, well, I appreciate your question, but this is just the beginning of this process, and we're here to dialogue with the public utilities and start the ball rolling with that. So
if it's the beginning of the process, why wouldn't we have all voices at the table?
Because I don't think it's quite time for all that, and I think they can join in by watching this as live stream, so they can see this and understand that. They have their representatives in the state that they can talk to. But this is just a dialogue between net zero with the utilities to get the ball rolling on this, to try to understand this. So, yeah.
Okay. So, Senator, I know you're a new member of the body, and there's always a learning curve, but whether it's your votes that demonstrated disdain for the will of the people, or your participation in a private briefing yesterday on a matter of grave public concern, now you bring forward a measure that essentially is meant to signal to, I guess, your voters or otherwise that you are a climate denier or a climate skeptic, along with 5 members of this committee and 20 members of the body, yet you exclude the public from participation in these very issues. If you'd like to respond.
Well, as far as what do you mean by climate denier?
How do you feel about climate change?
Yeah, I believe that the climate's constantly changing. I think from the beginning of time, I think if you look at the state of Nebraska, the sandhills were formed because we were covered with ice. We had an ice age, and the planet heated up, and the icebergs receded, and we now have the sandhills in Nebraska. So I'm not denying that the climate doesn't change. So I'm not a denier of that.
Okay, let's perhaps talk about the causes of climate change from your perspective. What are they?
I think that when you look at climate change, I think that there's a lot of variables that go into that. You have solar flares, you have just the climate changing, but to sit there and just say it's one thing, or it's based off of carbon, or based off of that, I don't know. And I'm not a scientist, but I know that this hearing's about keeping power affordable to the people, reliable, and to keep jobs in communities, and that's what I'm here for.
So, Senator, in your research that prompted this resolution and this hearing, I'm sure you came across a variety of statistics that show that Nebraska presently and historically is in the top 5 when it comes to reliability and affordability for power.
Absolutely.
And that our present portfolio, give or take, has over a third of clean energy sources that are prompting those high marks in both reliability and affordability. Mm-hmm. So what is your ultimate goal here? Would you like our energy portfolio to erase that third?
No, I'm all for green energy if it can stay affordable, reliable, and doesn't sacrifice Nebraska jobs. I'm all for that. If it can do that, I'm all for it. And that's what we're trying to talk here. So what is the power, these power units and plants, what's the cause of going net zero? Are we going to be able to achieve that in 2035 or 20 years down the road, or is it going to double people's rates? And we're in a time now where people are paying record property taxes. It's expensive to live, high inflation. The last thing citizens need in the state is having their electrical rates double. So that's what we're trying to, and if it's going to go that way, we have to have some type of off-ramp to protect the consumers and the ratepayers in the state.
And so what projection do you have available that shows that a local decision grounded in local control and our existing legal framework for this decision-making in a public power environment, statutory and regulatory scheme is going to double any Nebraskan's electricity rate.
Well, there'll be a testifier at the end. I think it's the last one who's dealing with this out in the western part of the state. It's Chimney Rock, I believe, who's going to testify, who's dealing with this right now. So he's going to talk about what his rates, what's happening as he's dealing with Colorado. So he's going to talk about that. So that'll be.
Okay.
And so I'm just trying to get ahead of this for the state of Nebraska.
Let's talk about local control though, because I know, for example, in my home community here in Lincoln, that these issues are carefully deliberated in the public purview, actually, with public hearings at both the utility level and at the city council level. So why do you think the state of Nebraska should exert a heavy hand on that exercise of local control and actual public participation in public power decision-making?
Because I don't think people want rolling blackouts. And that's what we have to get ahead of this and ensure that that doesn't happen. And intermittent power, like we're talking solar and wind, it is not as reliable. So as we're going to move more towards that, we have to make sure that we have some type of system in place to make sure it's reliable, affordable, protect jobs. And that's, I think, as state senator and as a member of this body, I think that's our duty.
Okay, but then how do you square up what you're asking the legislature to do in regards to a clear tradition, culture, and statutory framework for local control of these decisions?
Well, I haven't, this is just a study to start talking about this. I haven't came up with any type of bill or legislation to try to do this quite yet. I'm just trying to wrap our minds around what we're doing and hear from, and to learn. I'm here to learn. And get the ball rolling on this and see what the process is to protect the consumers and the ratepayers.
So your goal is inquiry and analysis. I will take you at your word. How did you select the testifiers for this hearing?
Well, they're the public utilities. It's the people who have net zero plans. That's who we asked to come in and testify and talk about whether or not if this is sustainable. That's who we. That's the test. That's the people that we brought in to hear how they're willing to achieve the net zero and what the impact that's going to be on the state.
So one last question. You mentioned that you're all for alternative energies if you can show it's reliable and affordable.
Affordable, reliable, and doesn't cost jobs. And and I'm like that on anything. I don't think if it has to be heavily subsidized to make this work, and then it's going to still cost the taxpayer or consumers more money, that doesn't make any sense to me. If we could come up with some type of energy that was going to be, like I said, affordable, and it's not going to raise their rates 40 or 50 or 100%, then I'm all for that.
So just to, again, put a finer point on it, my community in Lincoln has had a net zero resolution in place for well over a decade. And we haven't seen these kinds of wild projections like doubling rates here in Lincoln, or a complete lack of service or blackouts or things of that nature. Right. So what exactly are you just extrapolating from unforeseen fears from and trying to bring those to Nebraska energy policy?
So at the last hearing we listened, we want to move more towards green energy. That's what I kept hearing. We're going to move more towards green energy. Okay. So as we move more towards green energy, which can you always tell when the wind's going to blow for windmills? Can you always tell when the sun's going to shine for solar panels? So I mean, it's intermittent. You need base load energy. So as we are moving more towards green energy to make up more of our power grid, we have to make sure that that's going to be reliable. So that's for the last 10 years, we've slowly moved that way, and makes what they say makes a third of our energy now comes a third. So if we're going to go net zero, or we're going to go 2/3 of it, what's going to be the impact to the consumer?
Is net zero and a diverse energy portfolio the same thing? Are those synonyms for each other?
What's that again?
Is net zero and a diverse energy portfolio a synonym for each other? Are those the same things? Because you acknowledge you don't have a problem with a diverse energy portfolio, so what exactly is your
I don't have a problem.
contention with net zero?
If it can be reliable and affordable, I don't have trouble with that at all. And I realize too, to diversify our portfolio as a state, you have companies that want to come in here and they want to have green energy. And I think we have to protect that. I think that's important. We have to do that. If you want to attract some corporations that come, like we talked about Google, come into this state and they want to have green energy, we have to take that into consideration. But not at the expense of all the ratepayers in the state of Nebraska to do that. So,
Okay, is there something flawed in public policy's model, mission, or statutory directive that would allow them to undercut their consumers' best interest?
I don't think they would purposely try to do that, but I just
No,
think-
legally, can they do that? Can they take an action that's adverse to the public interest in a public power state?
I'm not sure on that.
Okay, maybe that would be good homework for your,
Yep, that
for your
would- that would be-
deliberations on this before you bring something before the committee.
Okay.
Maybe it's not quite ready for prime time.
That would be
Right.
good. We'll
Thanks.
follow up on that.
Do
But
we, Senator Klaus?
Yes, thank you, Senator Brandt. I wish you were asking me the questions. But,
Have at it, Stan.
as I looked at this, I thought, well, the political subdivisions, the state of Nebraska, that I had not looked at all these policies, so I appreciate this. I took a different approach to it than what you did, and I get where you're coming from. But I found it interesting just reading and seeing what the different policies were, and if this is step one or phase one, whatever, I found it, I think that, you know, it's just information as to
Sure.
what they're doing. I can go out
Absolutely.
and get it, I suppose. Is that, and so that's your intent, just information, and this is what all of the generating utility companies are doing in the state?
Absolutely, absolutely. Find out where they're at, and if we're gonna have these policies, what's gonna be the impact to the consumer, and I think that that's where we're starting.
Do you anticipate it going further? Or if what you get here is adequate and you feel comfortable that there's the policies on the elected boards of MPPD, LES, OPPD, or they're not jeopardizing the state?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what they have to say. Like I said, we sent out surveys, and some of the responses were pretty vague, so it'd be nice to have a little bit more follow-up with them on those answers and hear what they have to say today. I think anytime you can get people in the room and get information, I think dialogue, I think that's where you start.
So you don't have a step two that you're planning on right at this point?
No, I don't have a step two right now planned, but I am gonna try to make sure that the ratepayers are protected and that our energy, we have reliable energy in the state. I mean, I think that's, should be everybody's.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Moser?
Have you heard instances of outside interests, outside Nebraska coming in and trying to influence elections to public power boards? Have you heard anecdotal stories of that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a little bit. Nothing specific, but I think there has been some influence from outside to try to move the state more green. And I think, yeah.
Do you feel like some of the green energy supporters are very zealous in their pursuit of green energy, sometimes without regard to what the consequences might be of adopting their policies?
Yeah, I think that can be an issue, absolutely.
So is this kind of a measure to balance the consideration of what power distribution mix, or I'm sorry,
Right.
power generation mix the utilities have?
Absolutely.
To protect themselves against?
Absolutely. I think people need to know what this is gonna cost. I think it's very important for the consumers to know, and like I said, people are having trouble paying their property taxes and their taxes and just living, if they know their electrical bill is gonna double if we try to go down this road, I think people need to know that. I think we all need to know that. It's
But you're
important.
not denying that people are interested in green power.
Oh, I think there's a lot of people that are interested.
And some
in green power.
companies want to they want to buy green power for the
Absolutely.
business that they're in.
Hold on. Absolutely. I think that's they are, and I think if we can provide that here, and as long as it doesn't negatively impact ratepayers in the state to do that, I think we have to really ensure that. But if we can provide that here, and for economic development, bring people in, they want to buy green energy, that's.
You don't think the earth is flat?
No.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator. I didn't get a chance to write it down quickly during your opening, and maybe you can share some of that with us or the public for their analysis and deliberation. But you cited a study from 2 authors, and I think I did have a chance to at least do a quick Google search here, and it looks like they're associated with the Discovery Institute. Is that right? And the
No.
okay.
I'm not sure on that. I'd have to get back to you on that.
And it looks like a quick Google search shows that the Discovery Institute is a right-wing think tank that was primarily designed to combat evolutionary theory, and now is involved in denying the scientific consensus on climate change. So I just wanted to know if those were the sources you were citing.
I don't have that, but
Okay, thanks.
I'll look for that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We're going to go to our first invited testifier, John McNally, NPPD. Tom Kent, sorry.
Response.
Maybe you wanted to put John up here, I don't know.
Testifier list has been upgraded.
Yeah, it's been upgraded, you just forgot to tell me. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Brandt, members of the committee. My name is Tom Kent, T-O-M-K-E-N-T, President and Chief Executive Officer of Nebraska Public Power District. I have over 35 years of experience in the electric utility industry, and I'm a registered professional electrical engineer in the state of Nebraska. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today on this interim study to examine the impact of net zero plans and goals of public power utilities. I believe you're in receipt of NPPD's response dated July 7th to the committee questions that were dated June 20th. NPPD also provided copies of relevant board strategic directives regarding carbon emissions reductions, reliability and resilience, and cost competitiveness for the committee's review ahead of this hearing. I'm not going to rehash the information previously provided in detail, but I am prepared to discuss further and answer any questions during the question and answer period. I want to take a couple of minutes and just level set for our discussion and provide some context. First, the net zero versus zero carbon emissions. Achieving net zero emissions means that any greenhouse gases emitted are balanced by an equivalent amount of greenhouse gases being removed from the atmosphere. This can be achieved through a combination of reducing emissions and implementing carbon offset projects. The focus is on balancing emissions rather than eliminating them entirely. Achieving zero carbon emissions means that no carbon dioxide is emitted at all. The focus is on complete elimination of carbon emissions from all activities, which is neither achievable nor affordable with current technology and is not being pursued by Nebraska Public Power District. Second, regulatory uncertainty. There have been multiple federal laws and regulations impacting the electric utility generation planning and operations involving greenhouse gas emissions. The U.S. Supreme Court in 2007 determined greenhouse gas emissions were a pollutant under the Clean Air Act, and the EPA needed to take action to regulate them. A federal greenhouse gas reporting requirement has been mandatory since 2009. In 2015, the Obama EPA issued the Clean Power Plan regulations requiring significant reductions in power plant greenhouse gas emissions through various fuel switching options. During the first Trump administration, the Clean Power Plan was replaced with the Affordable Clean Energy Rule. During the Biden administration, the Affordable Clean Energy Rule was replaced with the 2024 greenhouse gas regulations requiring major reductions in emissions from coal-fired and natural gas plants, which have been targeted by the current Trump administration and various electric utility groups as both unreasonable and unachievable regulatory overreach. During the same period, the U.S. has been twice part of and twice removed from the Paris Climate Agreement, which would require greenhouse gas emission reductions by participating nations. Due to these greenhouse gas concerns and often more stringent air emission requirements under the various Clean Air Act programs, the amount of electricity produced by coal has fallen from producing half of the nation's power supply less than 20 years ago to around 16% in 2024. Natural gas is also a lower cost fuel for many parts of the nation, but not in Nebraska, where our proximity to low sulfur coal and relatively short haul costs gives Nebraska electricity customers a significant fuel cost advantage for coal. Nebraska continues to get approximately 50% of our electricity from coal-fired generation. Further, credit rating agencies, certain bond investors, and certain major insurance providers also express concerns about the amount of greenhouse gas and other air emissions associated with specific generating units and/or utilities. And third, from a level setting standpoint, I want to talk about customers and public power for a second. The most important strength of public power is our singular focus on our customers as our owners. Public power is accountable only to our customers, which is implemented through our board governance models. Whether a municipality, joint action agency, public power district, or cooperative, our boards are made up of and accountable to the customers we serve. It is important to note that our customers are very diverse, and you will hear today from all the speakers our unique customer needs drive our unique goals and strategies. Several large customers, for example, have requested NPPD furnish them with zero or low carbon electricity. This includes major employers in the state who sell in global markets. For example, the ethanol industry, which seeks to be competitive in the large California market, and other businesses and individuals who are seeking low carbon generation resources. We work to ensure we can meet these unique customer needs while assuring affordability, reliability, and resilience for all of our customers. Prudent utilities must take a long-term view when planning resources to meet the needs of our customers and serve growing and new customer loads in the ever-changing marketplace. NPPD's board adopted our strategic directive in 2021 after many months of public discussions with customer feedback. Carbon emissions and regulation present a business risk which must be managed. NPPD's policy goal is a net zero goal with a 2050 target and is conditioned upon no increase in cost or decrease in reliability. This goal reflects long-term regulatory, economic, and industry trends and is written to provide maximum flexibility and not compromise affordability, reliability, or resilience while serving the needs of our growing customer base. With that, I'll stop and answer any
I'm
questions.
sure
you may
there'll
have.
be some questions.
Yes.
Questions? Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Chair Brandt. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Kent. What happens is there any repercussions if you don't reach this by 2050? Like, what's the stick, if you will?
From a strategic goal perspective from our board, there is no quote stick. It's a aspirational goal for us to move to the future in a way that best serves our customers. It has clear off-ramps for both ensuring reliability and affordability. And it also recognizes that there is risk with carbon emissions. There is risk with regulatory uncertainty around carbon emissions. And it's how we are working to manage that as we move to the future.
So is it kind of like you've got two options in front of you? You need X amount more power. This one does release carbon, this one does not. Costs the same, changes nothing, you'll go, is that kind of it?
If it was that simple of an equation,
I
where
know,
you have
it's
two options that have the same
Wouldn't that be great?
characteristics, and one doesn't release carbon and one does, and the costs are the same, we're going to likely select the option that doesn't release carbon. But that's not a real situation.
I know, right? There's so much more to that. But,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Okay, Senator DeKay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kent, for being here today. Quick question. If your energy needs outgrow your generation ability and being on partner with SPP and you have to go on buy energy from SPP and with natural gas plants, the coal plants that are within the SPP footprint, how would that affect a net zero scenario in the state of Nebraska if we were going to be net zero by 2060?
So that's a very good question. It's a complicated question. So I'm going to back up and explain a little bit about how the SPP market works for all of the utilities within the 14-state footprint. We basically, all of us that are generating utilities, will offer our generation into the market every day, and the market will select based on price primarily, not just price, but also some reliability aspects, which generators will run to serve the load that's expected that day. Okay, and so now NPPD has two roles. We are a generating utility, we're also a load serving entity. So we're also in the market saying this is the load that we need to serve in Nebraska the next day. Okay, so as those things get stacked up, all the load stacks up, all the generators stack up, based on price, from low price to high price, that sets what the market is that day, and that determines which generation is running in the marketplace. So now, from a carbon goal standpoint, okay, our carbon goal is based on the generation we use to serve our native customers, all right? So we're gonna calculate that based, and I'm using NPPD as an example. We're gonna calculate that based on our resource mix, and the carbon-free resources are gonna be assigned to our customers first, okay, in terms of the value they provide from meeting the carbon goal. That is somewhat separate and distinct from how the market might use them, okay? The market's going to drive which resources are running that particular day, and so maybe on that day, all of our non-carbon emitting resources are running, including Cooper Nuclear Station, which is the largest non-carbon emitting resource in the state. Very important to the state's current carbon emissions goals, okay? All of those resources, the carbon benefit of that, or the non-carbon benefit of that, we would assign to our customers in the calculation we use in terms of meeting our net zero goal. We're not going to look at necessarily directly what's coming from the marketplace, though we can do that in general. To answer your question, Senator?
Yeah, with that, to reach your carbon net zero by 2060, how important is it for Cooper Nuclear SMRs to be, and what percentage do you think they are going to play in that net zero equation?
So to hit the goal, whether you want to talk about our utility or you want to talk about nationally, nuclear power will have to be part of that solution long term, in my opinion. Wind and solar and storage will be part of that solution long term, in my opinion. Okay? But as we go from where we are today to 2050, keeping Cooper Nuclear Station as part of the mix is critically important for NPPD. We are in the process right now of getting a subsequent license extension from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that would extend the licensed life of Cooper Nuclear Station from 2034 to 2054. We hope to have the answer on that license extension in 2027. Where we will be evaluating over the next year whether we want to do a further power uprate at Cooper Nuclear Station to get more output out of Cooper, which increases our carbon-free generation mix. We are in the process, thank you, Nebraska Legislature. A couple of years ago, you allocated some money through the Department of Economic Development to study preliminary siting locations for future nuclear power facilities, small modular reactors. We're in the process of finalizing that right now. If you're watching the media right now, we're out around the state in those communities doing coffee and conversations and education. Sometime near the end of this year, first quarter of next year, we will issue the final report through the Department of Economic Development, identifying 2 to 4 locations that would be good for new nuclear, advanced nuclear. Specific to NPPD, I will be working with our board over the next year or so to do a couple things. One, make a recommendation and ask for a board decision around whether we pursue a preliminary site license for our next nuclear facility. That's a significant investment. It also positions us to move quickly as we see how these new nuclear plants are developed, and we understand the economics and risks of construction related to those. None of these have been built yet beyond the AP1000s in Georgia, okay? The large plants. And then 2, we're going to work on down selecting technologies. So again, we can get to the point where we have a site, assuming the board authorizes us to proceed, we obtain a preliminary site permit, we know what technology we want to use. So as we see moving into the next decade, the risk around building a large or many small modular nuclear facilities is understood, we can move quickly to build those facilities. It's an important part of our future as we move to further reduce our carbon emissions.
With your expected load growth in the next, say, 6 to 10 years, is you feel NPPD is going to be able to grow enough generation through wind, solar, natural gas to meet those needs, or is there going to be more reliance on the outside markets to keep from having rolling brownouts and blackouts?
So I gave you all a handout, anticipating you might ask a question about where we are going with our future generation needs. And if you'll indulge me, I'd walk you through some of the information. Would that be acceptable, Senator?
Yep.
I just want to reference a couple things, and this is information that's primarily out of the Nebraska Power Association's annual load and capability report, which we are required to submit every year to the Nebraska Power Review Board. So it was most recently submitted in August of this year, so this is fairly new data. And it's a significant improvement over the story from where the industry was in the state a year ago, and that's what I want to point out, is that our job as an industry is to ensure that we grow our resources to meet the needs of the growing load. And I want to also point out that this is not an issue unique to Nebraska. If you look nationally right now, if you look at what's going on right now, what you're hearing from the current administration, what you're seeing from load growth, is the entire nation is going through a pretty explosive load growth, right? So we are doing what other utilities are, and we are working with our customers and our boards and these new loads to make sure that we can meet them in a need that's reasonable and makes sense. Just to point you to a couple things, on slide 3, you can see in this year's report what was studied and looked at in terms of resources coming into the state of Nebraska. And I want to specifically point out the resources that have been commissioned in the last year. And I want to give credit to OPPD here. OPPD commissioned, we have about 500 megawatts of new resources in the state of Nebraska since a year ago to meet this growing load. And that's primarily with the Turtle Creek station that OPPD just commissioned and is in service. If you look at where we're headed over the next several years, we have in our plans as an industry in the state, from a nameplate perspective, over 7,000 megawatts of new resources that we have either committed, which means we've received power review or board approval. We have planned for, which means that each utility is a little different, but in MPPD's case, that means that they're authorized by our board and we're proceeding ahead, or we're actually studying them in our resource planning processes as we look to the future. So this is our industry doing what we're supposed to do: serve the customer, serve growing load growth. And there's a lot of growing load growth, and it takes work. In MPPD's case, we've developed a load process to work with those customers to manage that and vet those loads and make sure that we all agree what needs to happen to get those loads served. So just briefly, again, on slide 4, this is an MPPD picture. The vertical bars are our resources. The blue bars are existing resources. The red bar is what we call Princeton Road Station, which our board has authorized. We've got contracts in place. We have an application in front of the Power Review Board for approval, and we expect it to be in service in 2029. The green bars are short-term purchases we're making to manage risk, and then the purple bars that are 3 different colors are the next set of generation, which are in our budgets to do. Our current load, as we look at the load we have today and the load that's growing, is the purple dash line. So you can see there that, again, I'm using MPPD as an example, we have adequate resources to serve our load, okay? The black line is the line that you hear about, and each region of the country will address it a little differently, but the fundamentals are the same from a physics and operation standpoint. That's how do you ensure that you have enough resources, and in the case of the Southwest Power Pool, it's on a planning basis. You plan that those resources will be available to ensure adequate reliability or resource adequacy on a really bad day. Okay, a really bad day is what Senator Storm described in PJM. A really bad day is Winter Storm Uri a few years ago. Historically, that's based on an engineering standard of no more than 24 hours worth of outages in a 10-year period related to this. Okay, that's 0.9997 reliability. My house in northern Lancaster County this year, I calculated my reliability, and we've had a lot of storms. It's about 0.98, right? So that's, for me, it was like 4 days of outage. Okay? So this is a really high bar. As the Southwest Power Pool evaluates these things and looks at the reliability and the mix of the resources and the intermittent resources versus baseload resources, they are increasing that standard. So on slide 4, it's going from 15% in 25 to 17% in 29, and that is part of what's driving the need for OPPD and MPPD and LES and all the members of Southwest Power Pool to grow their generation beyond the load growth. In the winter months, it's going from 15% to about 36, 37, 38%, a different analysis. So that black bar is what we plan against, that black line. The Nebraska Power Association stacks all that together for all the utilities, and the equivalent line on the NPA report, it representing the same thing as the black line on slide 5 and 6, okay? That basically says how much excess do we have over that resource adequacy requirement. The point I want to make here is in the last year, because of the work that's gone on in the industry, we've moved that bar 5 more years into the future. And next year, that bar is going to move further into the future in terms of that's what we do as an industry to make sure we can serve the growing load. And then slide 6 is the same view, but it's adding the studied resources, the long-term studied resources. To answer your question?
Yeah. Last question, SMRs?
Yes.
Are we gonna have them available within 6 years?
Small modular reactors, new small modular reactors, will we have them in service in 6 years in Nebraska? Is that the question? Likely not. 10 years, maybe so.
Wait,
So there's a lot of things that need to happen from a national policy standpoint to push it that fast.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Senator Conley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I just want to utilize your expertise to perhaps put a finer point on this for the record and for the committee. There seems to be myth and misinformation swirling in political circles that the development of renewable energies is going to cause a dramatic increase in costs and or make reliability suffer through blackouts. Would you like to respond to that?
I'll try. So I'll start with all resources are important. A diverse resource mix is important. Renewable resources, whether wind or solar, and storage resources are important. If we want to manage affordability and reliability and deal with resilience, we have to use all of the above.
Right.
If you want to create a system that is 100% renewable resources, you're going to struggle. It's going to be costly, and it's going to be a reliability challenge. To solve the problems that we were talking about here just a second ago regarding resource adequacy, the renewable resources don't provide the same value, the same tool for us to use to assure that we have resources on a bad day. So a renewable, just hypothetically using rough numbers, if you had a 100 megawatt nameplate wind farm, its value from a resource adequacy standpoint, from an accredited standpoint, is maybe 15 megawatts. So if you're trying to meet a resource adequacy goal, yeah, renewables may be part of that answer, but that won't be everything you need. You're going to need gas, you're going to need storage, you're going to need other affordable resources to give you the accredited capacity to manage the risk and reliability aspects of the system.
Right. Just like we're always counseled to diversify our financial portfolios at home to guard against risk, that's exactly what public power is doing in regards to pursuing its mission of affordability, reliability, and sustainability. It is utilizing a diverse energy portfolio to meet consumers' needs.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to think about it. I would agree.
So I'm new to this committee, so I'm an enthusiastic student and not an expert. I'm trying to always find credible information, and I've come across reports from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. It seems to be a credible organization that's out there. Is that a fair assessment? Are they biased? Do we know?
No, they are very credible. They're charged with assuring under federal law. They've been charged through delegation from FERC
Right.
with assuring reliability of the North American electric grid.
After some pretty significant outages, there was a shift in our federal policy to ensure that we learn those hard lessons and strengthen our grid for the
Yes.
future. And they were designated by the government to conduct this kind of analysis and research. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I see that their reporting shows that in fact coal plants have experienced more unplanned outages than other sources relative to their share of energy mix in recent years, and that trend is expected to continue due to aging infrastructure and a host of other sort of considerations that are out there. But in fact, looking at what we've together established as a credible expert organization on these kinds of issues and responding to Senator Storm's concerns about outages, it would in fact be myopic, looking at the research and history, to only utilize coal or gas to guard against outage. Is that fair?
What I would say is that diversity helps, because every type of resource is going to have outages. Every
Sure.
type of resource is going to have issues on a local basis, on a utility basis. It has much to do with how you care for and maintain the facility. Right? And NERC is reporting on national trends, and I'm not going to
Sure.
argue that. But every utility is going to set their goals and metrics based on what they believe is best for, in the case of public power, for their customers, right? To your point that I agree with is that diversity is important. A system that's made on 100% natural gas, or 100% coal, or 100% nuclear, or 100% wind and solar is at more risk for reliability issues than a diverse system is.
Yeah, fair. Okay, and then the last thing that comes to mind, in addition to, overdue maintenance or infrastructure issues that support some traditional fossil fuel sources that are out there, there's always environmental concerns as well. I know that our colleagues, for example, in Omaha, and perhaps Senator Juarez can speak to this as well, have talked about some of their concerns in living and working near a coal plant and what that means for their health and well-being as well. And I know that the Omaha area and our public utilities have taken great strides in order to make sure that those energy systems and infrastructure, dramatically reduced emissions, trying to make it healthier and more efficient at each stage along the way. But those are also considerations that perhaps come into play in regards to these important conversations. And I know that the public and those representing environmental interests were excluded from this public hearing today, but I know that you grapple with those issues in your boardroom. So if you'd like a chance to weigh in on that.
Well, I would say that those considerations, jobs,
Sure.
environmental impacts, affordability, reliability, all those considerations are important considerations. It's a holistic view.
Yeah.
And to the point I made earlier, that I firmly believe in, public power is better situated to address those those concerns, because we are owned and governed by our customers.
Yes.
By the people we serve. That's something that your predecessors established 90-ish years ago, and it's put Nebraska in a unique position that allows us to make these decisions at what I believe is the right level.
Yeah, an enviable position, I think. And I'm glad that you put a finer point on that, because I think while there's always room for improvement, there seems to be, again, a strange political undercurrent that somehow public power is broken. And I disagree with that. So thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, Senator Juarez.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I have a question, again, in regards to the coal. Now, it says here, Nebraska continues to be approximately 50% coal-fired electricity. So are there coal plants all over the state? How many are there?
I'm not sure I'll get them all off the top of my head, but for Nebraska Public Power District, we have 2 plants with 4 units, at Gerald Drummond Station in western Nebraska, and Sheldon Station south of Lincoln, outside of Howland, Nebraska. Omaha Public Power District has, you can ask them specifically, but they have units in Omaha, Nebraska City, City of Fremont, City of Grand Island, City of Hastings, I hit Nebraska City, yeah. I think I got most of them.
Okay, so in regards to what I've heard just through news sources is that, for example, in North Omaha, it's been stated that there are many children in that part of our city that suffer from asthma, and they attribute it to the coal plant that exists there. Do you agree with that news item?
I don't have a position one way or the other. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not a medical expert. I don't know whether that's factual or not factual. I don't have an opinion.
Okay, well, I would like to encourage you guys to take a look at that and see, you know, if that's a false statement, if that's something that legitimately needs to be a concern as far as the future goes. I think it's good to keep a fact like that in mind when you're looking at our energy sources. And I also wanted to ask you in regards to this Nebraska Power Review Board, could you remind me who makes up that board and how many members are there?
I'm going to say 5, but I'm not sure I'm accurate. The board is appointed by the governor and established by the legislature, and there's a couple members in the back of the room if you want to ask them at a break.
Okay.
And we can get that for you, Senator Juarez. Cindy can get you that list of who's on there and what positions they fill.
Well, I guess because I don't remember, you know, what are they tasked with as far as this review board?
From my perspective, what they're tasked with is regulating retail service areas. And determining public need and necessity for generation projects and transmission projects. NPPD spends a lot of time with our projects at the Power Review Board.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have for now.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Mr. Kent.
Yep, thank you.
So I'm showing your next testifier is Mr. Caton from Chimney Rock Public Power. No, I'm getting a no over here. So we are going on to Mr. Javier Fernandez from OPPD. Okay, got it. Welcome.
Thank you.
That's what, okay, got it.
I have some written remarks here. I don't want to forget anything. Thank you, Chair Brent, members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Javier Fernandez, Javier Fernandez, and I serve as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Omaha Public Power District. Throughout our history, we've adapted to meet our customers' challenging needs. In the 1940s, we helped electrify farms and rural homes. In the 1970s, we powered the rise of modern appliances and HVAC systems. Today, like then, we are facing unprecedented growth, driven by a rapidly evolving economy that depends on digital services, manufacturing, and infrastructure to thrive. OPPD's electric load is growing at a rate that we haven't seen in decades. We are adding about 2 gigawatts, that's 2,000 megawatts of anticipated new demand over the next 10 years. That's more than 2 Lincoln Electric systems. By comparison, just 10 years ago, our load growth was relatively flat. Here are some statistics to illustrate this growth. We've added more than 23,000 meters in the last 5 years. This is equivalent in size to the city of Grand Island. 400 miles of transmission will be built or upgraded in the next 10 years. 14 new substations, 25 substation expansions in the next 7 years, and a 400% increase in workload in the next 10 years. Makes me tired just to list those. In addition to expanding and upgrading our system, we are also working toward a net zero carbon goal by 2050, as approved by our board of directors in 2019. Let me state that is a goal, not a mandate, and we are approaching it with common sense, balancing affordability, reliability, and carbon emissions reduction. That being said, trade-offs must be made so that we can have a system that is reliable and affordable. Prior to this hearing, we addressed some questions for this committee. Now, we continue to follow the 2014 plan approved by our board of directors to retire the 3 oldest units at our North Omaha station, while transition the remaining 2 units from coal to natural gas. Now, this resolution occurred 5 years before OPPD even adopted a net zero goal that was based upon OPPD's reasonable flat load growth at that time. We were not growing back then. We are growing a lot today. The timing of the North Omaha transition depended on achieving our regulatory milestones, and OPPD estimated that changes could potentially be finished in 2026. Now, that being said, the regulatory landscape has proven unpredictable at best for all utilities, and interconnection and recurring studies of network upgrades of new resources have been repeatedly delayed. We are also mindful of how this transition approved before our most recent load growth projections intensifies our need for more generation. We are on our way to doubling the size of our system. Just 24 hours ago, we cut a ribbon on a new power plant. Thank you, Senator Brandt, for attending. Turtle Creek Station in Papillion. But as we cut the ribbon, work is already underway to add another unit to that site. It was both a ribbon cutting and a groundbreaking ceremony at the same time. This plant also, plus our new standing Bear Lake Station in northwest Omaha, will add approximately 600 megawatts of gas generation to our fleet. We are also constructing nearly 900 megawatts of natural gas generation to be completed by 2029, as well as adding hundreds of megawatts of renewables. And this is still not enough. After North Omaha Station's refuel and retirement are complete, we expect our system to be reliable as prescribed by regulations. It is reasonable also to say that the system would have more margin and better reliability and resilience if the retired assets had remained in service. Now, in short, keeping the station online allows for more reliability margin. It also makes for better affordability and would enable economic growth for customers. However, we also acknowledge that delaying the refueling retirement plans means a slower progress towards our net zero journey. We know that generation mix is changing and the grid is evolving, and we also know this: Nebraska needs power, and it has the best public power organizations to meet this challenge. All kinds of power: coal, wind, solar, natural gas, and next generation nuclear technology. In terms of generation needs, this is not an either or, but rather an all of the above situation. Energy is the economic engine of the heartland. At OPPD, we're doing everything we can to make sure that that engine keeps running well. But we reserve the right always to get smarter every day and evolve our energy supply to meet the needs of the economy. I want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, let's see what we've got for questions. Senator Klaus.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Javier, thank you for being here. Just to reiterate, you have not closed any plants down to meet a net zero goal?
Not today, no.
Okay. Senator DeKay.
Thank you. Your coal-fired plants, can I ask where you purchase your coal from?
Wyoming.
And that's low sulfur coal?
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to compliment you. I was at the ribbon cutting yesterday. That's pretty amazing that you've got a brand new gas-fired power plant in the middle of these cornfields just east of Gretna. And right now, that's 600 meg or 400 meg?
Right now it's 450 megawatts.
But you're going to add a third unit to make it,
675 megawatts.
and at the same time, you also had another facility of 150 meg on the other side of Omaha. Is that correct?
In the northern part of Omaha, that's not commercially operational, but we're within weeks of that. That will add over 150 megawatts.
And just a point of clarification, if you had to order a new gas turbine today, how many years out is that?
It varies, but I would say it's probably between 3 and 4 years, just the equipment,
Okay.
plus the installation. So these new power plant that you visited yesterday, the ribbon cutting for that one, it took us, we started construction in 2020, and we finished in June of 2025, so 6 years. Our estimations based on the supply chain demand and supply chain constraints based on global demand is that 6 year period is probably going to be 7 or 8 years for building and installing new power plants. Now, it is important to add the timeline for our power plants is a little longer because we've also added dual fuel capabilities. So building that redundancy takes a little longer.
And then the last question I have is, when you get rid of a ton of coal, which is probably the worst of the carbon emitters, and you would replace that with natural gas, is natural gas considered a medium or a low carbon emitter or a high carbon emitter?
There are many studies. Generally speaking, this is considered to have about half the emissions for the same amount of energy.
So in other words, you could get rid of one coal plant and put up 2 natural gas plants, and then you essentially would be even on the carbon credit.
Generally speaking,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Now we'll go to LAS, and I'm going to try here Emeka Anawan. Is that right?
Close enough.
Okay. I'll let you take it from here. Welcome.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Emeka Anyanwu, Emeka I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Lincoln Electric System. I joined LES as CEO at the beginning of 2024, in January 2024. And I want to thank the committee again for the opportunity to respond to this resolution. We appreciate the legislature's willingness to hear directly from the utilities who are owned by, accountable to, and governed by the communities that we serve. LES is a municipal utility, unlike our peers you just heard from, so we're not a public power district. We're governed by an administrative board appointed by local elected officials pursuant to the municipal code of the city of Lincoln. LES's administrative board adopted resolution 2020-16 on November 20th, 2020, resolving to, in part, mitigate its reliance on fossil fuels by establishing a goal to achieve net zero carbon dioxide production from its generation portfolio by 2040. And the language of that resolution is important. So in my statement today, I have three main points. One is that to reiterate the point that has already been made by my colleagues earlier, that net zero does not mean 100% carbon free or 100% renewable. LES's decarbonization goal explicitly requires that we account for reliability and fiscal responsibility. And finally, that local control is a strength of Nebraska utility service and should be preserved. So to start with the first point, I won't sort of go over stuff that you've already heard, but as you've heard already, net zero and 100% renewable or carbon free are not the same. Net zero carbon means ensuring any carbon emission from our generation portfolio is able to be balanced by removal of an equivalent amount from the atmosphere. So in general, that means reducing emissions to a level that they can be offset. The goal was selected with the intention to be achievable, balancing operational realities and service obligations. Utility resource planning processes are complex and well-governed. Utilities have long held responsibility for resource planning and long-term strategy, and prudent utility planning practices consistently provide that portfolio diversity is an essential element of planning, acquiring, and operating generation to serve our customers. Again, as I said earlier, our board resolution also provides that the ultimate path and pace to achieving our goal must be balanced by a continued commitment to maintain high electric system reliability, environmental stewardship, a fiscally responsible focus that carefully considers financial impacts to all customers. And it goes on to talk about some of our customers who are particularly vulnerable, as well as the advances of technology that will be necessary. So the language provides LES with the flexibility to adjust the pace or approach as needed based on evolving conditions and customer needs. Our goal is a target, not a mandate, like our colleagues have provided for theirs as well. There's no requirement in the resolution to achieve it at the expense of reliability or affordability. There is no established or adopted cost estimate, rate increase schedule, or projected impact on residential customer bills related to net zero commitment. No specific planning or resource acquisition action is required by the resolution in recognition of several factors of uncertainty around technology, around regulatory statutory changes, electric market volatility, and other things. The goal is intended to be achieved in concert with our ongoing resource planning decisions made by the utility with the guidance of our board. Since the adoption of that board resolution in 2020, LES has not made any portfolio decisions not driven by a balanced approach considering said service, fiscal, and operational factors. Our decisions are not purely beholden to the 2040 target. They will be evaluated through LES's established planning processes that prioritize system reliability, affordability, and customer impact, just as they would in the absence of a formal net zero goal. Our last IRP, Integrated Resource Plan, took over a year to complete, and our board and staff to deliberate on, and was the culmination of an even greater period of analysis and operational considerations by subject matter experts at the utility. Finally, on local control, our utility is governed by a 9-person administrative board who represent the interests of our community. They're appointed by the mayor of Lincoln and confirmed by the Lincoln City Council, all of whom are elected officials. LES's net zero decarbonization goal as established by our administrative board aligns with the City of Lincoln's broader sustainability objectives, which are also adopted by the same duly elected City Council. Included in our process for our IRP is a requirement for public input and hearing, which we work diligently to ensure. Additional governance and oversight are also well established in state statute. Finally, LES staff have consistently worked in concert with our board to make prudent, operationally and fiscally sound choices that reflect our community's needs, interests, and priorities, as evidenced by our recent resource decisions, which have included additions of natural gas, hydro and wind generation, as well as a battery storage pilot. We are confident that we can continue this decades-long track record of effective local decision-making in the context of our net zero goals. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
All right, let's see what we've got for questions. Senator Juarez.
Okay, thank you. All right, could you repeat for me, because you mentioned about how you are a municipal, so that I understand you correctly, that all of the folks on your board are appointed by the mayor, or who did you say?
Yes, the members of our board are appointed by the mayor of Lincoln and are confirmed by our city council.
Okay, and so how long do they remain on your board?
They are limited to, I believe, 3 consecutive 3-year terms. But obviously, not every board member serves that full limit.
Okay, and I'm just curious then, are your rates for electricity pretty similar to Omaha's? What would you say in the history that they've been like?
I don't know that I can speak specifically about our rates relative, and obviously different rate structures, different rate classes, and so I don't know that I can speak specifically to our rates directly compared to Omaha's, but we can certainly get that information.
Okay, thank you. I would be very curious to have it.
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Okay, other questions? Real quick, I guess, LES is probably one of the smaller generators here. How much generation does LES have?
We have approximately, I can get to that fact here real quick.
About?
Approximately 900 megawatts of generation that we operate.
And then that's natural gas or diesel or?
So our mix right now is about a third, basically across the board. Our 2026 projected mix nameplate will be about half renewable, and then the remainder natural gas and coal.
Okay, all right. Thank you for your testimony.
All right, thank you.
Yep. So now the next one, I do not have a name. Is somebody here from Mean? Okay.
Sorry. I think I got a young brain, but I got to hold back.
Welcome.
Yep, thank you very much. Chairman Brandt, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Bob Poehling, B-O-B, P-O-E-H-L-I-N-G, and I'm the Executive Director and CEO of NMPP Energy, so thank you very much for an opportunity to testify today as part of the LR 234 study. NMPP Energy is a coalition of companies that provide wholesale gas, retail gas, utility services, and wholesale electricity to municipal utilities across the states of Iowa, Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. Our company that provides wholesale electricity is the Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska, or MEAN. MEAN is a non-profit wholesale public power provider serving more than 60 member communities across Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, and Iowa. In Nebraska, we serve approximately 69,000 people, or roughly 3% of the state's population. We are governed by representatives appointed by our member communities, reflecting our commitment to local control and public power principles. Unlike other utilities, MEAN does not own or operate generation facilities. We rely on contracts, minority ownership interests, and the Southwest Power Pool market to serve our members' needs. For MEAN and our members, reliability and affordability remain the top priority. Our communities expect reliable power every time they flip the light switch. Affordability is equally important, particularly for rural communities and small towns that depend on us. I think it's important to clarify our interpretation of terminology that is often used interchangeably but has very different meanings to us. Carbon neutrality as MEAN has defined in our board's vision, means achieving net zero carbon dioxide emissions in our power portfolio, potentially through direct reductions or offsets, such as carbon credits or carbon sequestrations, or even other technologies that have not even been developed yet. Our definition of net zero, which has been talked about greatly today, more broadly refers to eliminating or offsetting all greenhouse gases, not just carbon dioxide. So those would be like methane and nitrous oxide, ozone, hydrofluorocarbons, and sulfur and such. This distinction matters to our members, and our approach reflects the diversity of the needs across those 4 or 5 states that I mentioned earlier. In 2020, our board adopted an aspirational, non-binding goal of achieving a carbon-neutral wholesale power supply portfolio by 2050. This vision is not mandated by state or federal law. It does not include implementation plans, rate schedules, or project timelines, and it is not intended to compromise reliability or affordability, which remain our foundational values. Today, about 50% of our energy portfolio is already carbon-free, including wind, hydro, landfill, gas resources. We also strongly support the role of nuclear energy in maintaining reliability while moving forward toward a carbon-free future. Even as technology evolves, one fact is clear: Nebraska needs dependable, dispatchable baseload generation to serve our citizens and support economic growth. Intermittent resources like wind, solar, they can play a role, but they do not replace the steady output of resources fueled by coal, natural gas, or nuclear. Our communities cannot afford to risk reliability by moving faster than technology allows. So in closing, MEAN's position is straightforward. We support local control of resource decisions because there is no one-size-fits-all approach. We will always put reliability and affordability first, and while we are open to long-term aspirations, we cannot compromise our baseload generation and flexible tools required to keep Nebraska's grid strong. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let's see what we've got.
I have a question.
Senator Warren.
Thank you. So I would like to know, do you have any opinion about how our country keeps going in and out of the Paris Climate Agreement?
Yeah, that's a bit above my pay grade, Senator. I don't have a strong opinion either way on that. I don't disagree. You know, depending on change in administration in D.C., it does seem to swing in and out, but don't have a strong opinion either way.
Do you feel that, that our utility companies that are, that exist in our state, that they probably have a good direction on their own without being a part of something that, other countries may be participating in? Well, we're still good leaders locally, basically, I guess is what I'll say.
I think you've heard today from my other colleagues that we all embrace efforts to be good environmental stewards and to not look at any one-size-fits-all or one type of fuel source is required. I think we're all interested in diversification and utilizing whatever technology is out there to ensure that we remain true to our member communities and our respective boards in terms of what their interests are as it pertains to environmental stewardship.
Well, I think that, being a new senator and obviously new to the Natural Resources Committee, it really has been a lot to learn.
It is.
And so, although I understand our role and how we have to be concerned from our perspective also about what's going on in the state and what we can do to protect the resources in our state. I just think that it's also important for all the companies to do their part too, and I feel real positive about the leadership that the companies show. Thank you.
Any other questions? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our last invited testifier will be Mr. Curtis Caton from Chimney Rock Public Power. Welcome.
Welcome. I have a testified at a hearing where I've been introduced several times, so I hope I don't disappoint here.
That's the beauty of this committee. We hear things twice.
Chairman Brandt, members of the committee, my name is Curtis Caton, spelled C-U-R-T-I-S, last name Caton, K-A-Y-T-O-N. I'm the general manager at Chimney Rock Public Power District located in Bayard, and I'm grateful for this opportunity, been invited to come testify at this hearing. I have some real basic slides in my handout, and I'm representative of a distribution rural public power district. We've heard from the generators, all of them I'm familiar with, and it's normal that our wholesale power suppliers are a generation and transmission association, transmission cooperative, and I'm going to tell a tale of two G&Ts. We actually have two G&Ts that operate in the state of Nebraska. One is germane to Nebraska, one is headquartered in Denver, and there is I'm going to explain some of the differences between the two and how they're relevant with net zero policies, green policies, clean energy goals and endeavors. My first slide shows the footprint of my generation co-op, Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, located in Westminster, Colorado. Their footprint, they serve members in not only Colorado, but New Mexico, Wyoming, and Nebraska. The Panhandle of Nebraska is who serves us and us 6 systems on the next page. As you might expect, they're the systems that are overlaid in red, okay? The Nebraska G&T is located in Columbus, and it's overshadowed in gray. Its members are in gray, okay? That is also the members of their administer the contract from NPPD, and its membership is in gray. That is also overlays the footprint of NPPD, what NPPD serves in the state. I'm going to focus on the red systems out west in the Panhandle, okay? This has largely happened, we're not served by NPPD, and that's largely a function of history. We were chartered Tri-State was chartered in 1957, and we were organized with them then. NPPD hadn't came along till 1970, so we didn't have the opportunity to seek a wholesale contract with NPPD then, so we've been served from Tri-State for the last 70 years. Today, the rate differences are pretty stark. Didn't always start out that way, but as you might expect, there should be no surprise that Colorado is states' rights. They've had very aggressive, very zealous green targets, net zero, and clean energy goals. And I'm here to tell you there's a cost difference, okay? Today, average price for 2024 wholesale power was 8 cents a kilowatt hour, okay? The exact same wholesale power in Nebraska, okay, was 5.7 cents in 2024, all right? Every generator is building, okay? They're preparing for the future for all kinds of reasons, all right? We have new loads that we're looking at that we're going to connect. These are the rate increases that we're looking at as the 41% and the 14% from a public power resource to a multi-state generation and transmission cooperative headquartered in Colorado. This last slide is illustrating the past 24 years of rate performance. The Panhandle systems in Nebraska have overpaid for the same wholesale power supply by $300 million, a little north of $300 million, okay? And as you can see in 2000, the disparity wasn't a big difference. In 2024, there's a huge difference between NPPD, a public power generating and transmission organization, assets to serve the public in Nebraska, and generation assets that are influenced by green and net zero and those endeavors, those policies that are not germane to Nebraska. That's my story, and I'd be willing to take any questions.
Okay, let's see what we've got. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Chair Brandt. Thank you for coming in. What stops the rest of the Panhandle joining NEGT? Is it transmission? Why can't you just switch over? Because I would.
There's
That's way better.
probably the same reason we just can't pull levers and
Is it the
switch from
generation
coal
line, transmission lines?
to renewables. A lot of contractual obligations.
Can you get, can you look at it for the, like, okay, this contract ends? Is it a possibility?
We are looking at that possibility, yes.
Yeah, man. Jump ship. That's it, thanks.
Other questions? I guess I've got a quick one. When I look at this map, having been up to the Powder River in Wyoming, it seems that you're adjacent to one of the biggest energy producing states in the nation, that they would also be trapped in that high cost of electricity, would they not? This is where the cautionary tale comes into this, okay? Our GNT is headquartered in Westminster, in Colorado, influenced by Colorado's legislature. Those policies spill over the borders of Colorado and get the benefit of imposing their costs on New Mexico ratepayers, Wyoming ratepayers, and the Panhandle of Nebraska. In addition to the Colorado ratepayers. Isn't there a board of directors?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Isn't it divided out by the states or power districts?
It's one member, one vote. There's Tri-State. Tri-State is and I'm just going to tell you, Tri-State's a good GNT, okay? They're a good GNT. They operate in a horribly bad regulatory environment. But yes, there is representation there, and yet our ERPs, the electric resource plans that we have to comply to, have to be compliant with Colorado law, not necessarily Nebraska law.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, I hope you're sticking around for the football game tomorrow. It's going to be a long drive home tonight, huh?
I'm actually going fishing in South Dakota, so
that's
yeah.
right on the way home. Thank you for testifying.
Thank you.
Senator Storm, would you care to close? Okay, he's waving his close, and with that, we are closing LR 230. Oh, wait a second, I'm out of practice here. For LR 234, comments for the public record, we had 6 proponents, 18 opponents, and 6 in the neutral capacity. And with that, we're closing the hearing on LR 234. Thank you, everybody, for sticking it out.